Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Claire awakens from the dream, sheets and nightgown soaked. Yanking the covers off, she rushes into the bathroom and throws cold water onto her face to help stem the hot flash. But it doesn't work. She fumbles down the dark hallway and into the kitchen, opens the freezer door, and shoves her head inside, sucking in the frigid air, relishing the cold against her damp, clammy skin. The refrigerator beeps an annoying warning. The door's been open too long. She snatches a handful of ice cubes and shuts it just as Barbara steps into the kitchen and flicks on the light. Claire frowns. A wave of jealousy slams into her chest. Embarrassed by her appearance, shorter stature, disheveled hair, unpainted face, and cellulite. Both women are knocking hard on 60's door, and Claire looks it. But Barbara doesn't look a day over 30. The silk long floral robe in vibrant crimson caresses the highly sought-after influencer's impeccable body. She's worked for the woman for a decade and knows Barbara's never used injectables or felt the slice of a surgeon's knife. It's 2:30 in the morning, yet Barbara looks like she just stepped out of a salon. Not one auburn hair out of place, makeup flawless, as always, and no creases on her skin from a pillowcase or rolling around, which means her boss was recording another video for Claire to edit. Even without a connection to the outside world and all the millions of adoring fans around the globe, she's so addicted to seeing herself on camera, she cannot put the phone down. How pathetic. And considering Claire's plans, a waste of time. Ah, yes. Unmarried, childless, and now menopausal, Claire Renee Foster is nothing more than the frumpy lackey of social media icon, Barbara O'Malley. The stunning beauty is a worldwide phenomenon, known for showing the sisterhood of women over 40 to embrace the changes naturally, with grace and dignity. And her $99.95 per month homeopathic hormonal replacement therapy elixir subscription, a cash cow that allows her to live a lavish lifestyle that Claire runs. Good times. Not. Barbara flashes a dazzling white smile while floating past her and retrieves a mug from the cabinet.
Here, you're dripping all over the hardwood. I'd hate for you to slip and fall since we're in the middle of nowhere, miles and miles from civilization, and you know I don't drive. One mishap could turn into disaster. And I cannot function or run this empire without my tech guru and BFF.
A wave of heat flushes up from her chest to cheeks while grabbing a dish towel and wiping up the water. Sorry. These freaking hot flashes will be the death of me. It feels like I'll spontaneously combust any second, plus the hormonal changes have caused hair loss, weight gain, mood swings, dry skin, and terrifying nightmares. I'm so over them all. I'd hoped being here in the mountains during the cold winter would have at least slowed them down. But they are relentless. I just ruined our vacation to rest and regroup after a stressful year.
No, you didn't. We both needed a break, and this cabin and the remote location you chose are perfect. No cell service and no distractions from a phone constantly dinging. A time for inner reflection and reconnection with the earth and universe. And that is exactly what we're doing. You know I preach women cannot run from menopausal symptoms. They must outsmart them. Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry. This is what, the 6th one in 3 days?
Claire nods. Barbara's jade green gaze sweeps over her, and she feels violated by the probing stare.
My career spawned when I stopped those things in their tracks after the first one dared to rear its ugly head. My elixir created this face and body, which pays the bills and allows me to live my truth. Are you ready to try it now? It's high time you did, so your true inner beauty shines through and regenerates the outer degeneration. Then you can get in front of the camera with me rather than behind it. Can you imagine how my followers will react when they see the changes in someone like them? Say the magic word and I'll prepare us a fresh batch, and then you can kiss the symptoms of aging goodbye.
Claire hides the irritation from her face and laughs nervously while crunching on an ice cube. She's helped prepare the magic elixir for years and knows it doesn't work, which is why she takes real medication prescribed by a doctor. Of course, that isn't working either, and is the reason she's sought out another avenue. Yes, because at this point, I drink deer urine if it would help.
Sit. I'll be done in a flash. Oops, bad word choice.
Barbara chuckles while motioning toward the living room, her cherry red nails shimmering underneath the lights as she flicks her wrist.
You know, I've learned over the years our dreams are merely repressed, unconscious longings driven by what we desire but are too afraid to embrace. If you trust me enough to share the details, perhaps we can figure out what you need to be fulfilled and live your best life, like me.
If she hears that inane expression one more time, her brain will explode. I don't know. It was quite scary.
Fears are nothing more than a state of mind. I remember reading that in a book, although it was so long ago. I can't recall which one, but the phrase became my personal mantra and changed my life. Gave me the courage to overcome every single stumbling block I've encountered, which have been many, including aging. I'm so tired of watching you suffer when I'm able to help you, because your issues affect your work performance and my followers expect nothing but perfection from their idol. Spill. I'm all ears.
While Barbara piddles around the remote rental cabin's kitchen, preparing what Claire secretly named Witch's Brew, a concoction of herbs and various teas, Claire settles into the cool leather couch, carefully holding her hand in front of her lips to hide a smile. It's showtime. The book said it will work if all the steps are followed in the correct order, just like the dream. Please let it work. I cannot stand living another day trapped inside this failing body. I'm in the forest at night. A thick tangle of pine, maple, and oak trees are overhead, creating a living canopy. The moon's silvery rays filter through, guiding me while I walk on a twisted path, unsure of where I'm going, yet unable to ignore the urge to continue forward. I'm dressed in a long red robe, dragging across the damp ground, and sense someone is beside me, yet cannot see anyone. The weirdest thing is, there's no sound. Not one insect, animal, or even my footsteps.
Oh, that is interesting. No sound or voice in a dream means you feel powerless, misunderstood, or insecure. Go on.
Yes, powerless and insecure. That's certainly me. But not for much longer. The book showed me a way out. I just need to get you to say the words. Claire muses silently before continuing. I find myself in a clearing, inches away from a large slab of stone shaped like a dinner table in the middle. Rhythmic chanting fills the forest, like Mother Earth is leading the sisterhood of the forest in an orchestra, just for me.
Loud music or sounds are indicators you should increase your awareness level and pay attention to what is going on around you in life. Got it. Continue, please.
I'm swaying in harmony with the sound, compelled by this intense energy exuding from what I suspect is a blood-stained altar. The clouds above part, and the moon's tendrils illuminate the glen, and the presence I felt earlier glides across the ground until in front of the stone, robe-clad arms outstretched toward the vibrant moon. A melodic female voice speaks in a language I don't understand, but immediately sense. Consists of incantations or prayers or supplication. The thick stone turns this weird crimson color and pulsates, like a heartbeat.
Red, the color of aggressive forces or great passion and emotional power. Or maybe blood, the source of all life. You desire to overcome your insecurities, and the universe is guiding you toward finding your inner passion and power. Now we're getting somewhere.
Barbara gushes. Oh, yes, we are. Almost there. Damn, this is so exciting. All the lost sleep learning Latin will finally pay off. I'm frightened yet mesmerized by the ethereal pull of the throbbing stone. The rope flitters to the ground, and the body partially turns toward me, and sure enough, a woman with long auburn hair, like yours, looks at me, but she's pregnant, and the most beautiful human being I've ever seen.
Sounds just like me, except the pregnant part. Our bodies are temples, but sadly the universe never afforded us the opportunity to experience motherhood. Yet another bond we share.
Barbara sighs. You've never had a child because the men drawn to your beauty end up recoiling in horror when they realize you are the most self-absorbed narcissist on the planet. The eggs inside me refuse to create offspring with any of the few ugly men I let touch me. I cannot wait to seek out hunks and ride them until spent without the fear of pregnancy. Her pulse quickens. She's reached the point of no return in the story and must steer Barbara in the right direction. The woman mounts the stone and stretches out, body covering the glowing rock. An ancient silver dagger appears in her hand, slender fingers clasped around the bone-encrusted handle.
Oh, now we're cooking. I'm getting a killing off the old so the new can emerge vibe here. Anything else?
Yes, that's what I thought too, and it scared me. She looks at me and speaks before plunging the knife into her heart. But that's where it ends. The worst part is, I don't understand what she said. Barbara is pouring steaming water into 2 mugs and immediately pauses.
Do you recognize what language it is?
No, but it is very beautiful. Lyrical.
Think, Claire. This might be the key to unlocking the dream. Do you recall enough to repeat it?
Claire's mouth is dry as excitement floods her body. She nods, forcing herself to enunciate properly what she has rehearsed ever since finding the spellbook at an obscure occult shop in Los Angeles. Hunc oblationem spontanea voluntate facio et apertis accus in hunc sanguinem ineo. Barbara's eyes widen.
That's Latin.
Even from across the room, Claire can see Barbara's face and arms turn ghostly pale. She forces herself to sound shocked. Really? Do you know what it means?
I'm a little rusty, but yes, I think so. She said, I make this offering of my own free will, and with open eyes I enter into this blood pact.
Claire fights the urge to leap from the couch and jump for joy. She said it. Hallelujah. It has begun. Soon I'll have what's rightfully mine, and my worries about looks, men, money, and aging will be over.
Whew, there's a lot going on inside of your head, sweetie. It might take some time to fully comprehend it all. Oh, dang. This bottle of black cohosh doesn't have enough for both of us. Hang on, and I'll get some from my purse, and then we can start the process of figuring out the best plan of action to address your worries.
Barbara struts down the hallway, just exactly like Claire envisioned when planning this moment. On silent feet, she pads into the kitchen, snatches the Jimson weed she picked and dried earlier from her purse, and deposits the exact amount of dollops into Barbara's vibrant red mug, plastered with her logo. She's sweating profusely with nervous energy by the time she makes it back to the couch, seconds before Barbara returns.
The final pièce de résistance, needed to vanquish the effects of aging.
Barbara stirs a tablespoonful into each mug before entering the living room. She hands the black one to Claire.
To the sisterhood of women and the inner strength and determination to face and conquer what frightens us, including the sands of time.
Amen, Claire cheers, followed by several sips of the fragrant brew, watching eagerly over the rim as Barbara downs the entire contents of the mug in one large gulp. The book said to wait 15 minutes for it to take effect. Keep talking. Keep her occupied until she's pliable, before leading her out into the woods to begin the blood ritual. Soon we will switch bodies and trade lives. Well, hers will end in this wretched flesh after having a tragic accident, but mine will be glorious in hers. It's happening. It's really happening.
Huh. Interesting. This batch tasted different. I wonder why. Maybe the black cohosh was old? Oh my. Something's wrong.
The mug slips from Barbara's hands, shattering upon impact with the hardwood. Claire's body shudders with excitement, even though she's shocked it's happening so fast. Barbara smiles, and Claire's hair stands on end.
No, that's not it. I detect something familiar. Oh, yes. Belladonna, also known as Jimson weed. Right, sweetie?
Claire is dumbfounded. How in the world does she know? Why does her voice sound so different? So ominous, and with a hint of a southern accent. A wave of heat flushes her skin, surging up from her neck all the way to her ears. Her entire body trembles and vision blurs. She tries to move her legs, but they remain frozen in place.
You studied hard, bestie. Though I must admit, taking the bait hurt me. Out of all the women who've worked for me over the centuries, whom I've introduced to the book, you were the only one I considered a friend and true sister. Claire, we had so much in common. I wanted us to find a suitable sacrifice together. And believe it or not, planned on allowing you to partake in the benefits once we did. But unfortunately for you, that is not to be. I had high hopes you'd be strong and fight the temptation to covet all that I am. But I was wrong.
It takes great effort for Claire to form words. Her tongue is thick. Centuries. I don't understand.
No, I'm sure you do not, as the poison courses through your veins that I slipped in rather than the black cohosh. Here's a quick and simple explanation. I'm a lot older than I look, and I'm quite tech-savvy, have access to all your internet search history. Discovered your friendship and loyalty were just facades after reading countless private messages and discovering your interest in the occult. So I sent you to pick up herbs and spices at the store instead of ordering them online. Lirio's occult shop was right next door, and sure enough, you entered and bought the spellbook and went right to the section created for me.
Claire's palms are clammy and her heart thunders inside her sweaty chest. Your spell?
Yes, created by me and my mother a long time ago, about 3 miles from this cabin. In my day, women who were beautiful, intelligent, and had strong intuition were burned alive. I watched in horror as it happened to several innocent young ladies, each one wrongfully accused by jealous women or lustful men. And my mother told me as I moved closer and closer to adulthood, my time would come. She was right. so we prepared accordingly at night when everyone else slept.
Claire's throat feels like she's swallowed bleach.
It is so confusing to me, and I will never understand why women don't support their sisters. Tragic. I've only encountered a few who overcame their own insecurities. Most secretly hate anyone they feel pose as a threat, whether it is physical beauty, financial stability, or a gaggle of offspring with the man they have their sights set on. I've waited a long time to experience a change, but women are still backstabbing harpies with no redeemable qualities. Trust me, I know from years of interactions. Superstition, fear, and jealousy, those three combined were my downfall on a cold winter's evening when the men came with torches to my father's home. All because two hussies told their parents I put a hex on them when they were caught naked with their legs in the air and young men grinding on top of them in a barn. The tale was a lie, but I did possess the ability to do such magic until the moment the pyre was ignited. So my fate was sealed, even though I had done no wrong.
Claire's mind is spinning at a frantic pace.
I never screamed, not one time, because I refused to give the inhumane creatures surrounding me the satisfaction of hearing my pain. Instead, just like Mama and I planned, I reached out inside my mind to the universe and spoke the exact same words you did earlier in Latin. Eternal life and exquisite beauty was granted to me for a price, which must be paid by sacrifice every 10 years. During the final seconds of my life, everything went black, and then I found myself watching my body burn from a place in the trees. Each decade when the sacrifice is offered, the hands of time are reversed 30 years for me, and I may remain in my original form or take over one of the sacrifice. But in nearly 400 years, I haven't found one who compares to my beauty. I need your life force to regenerate. Such a tragic choice on my end. I let my guard down with you and thought I might enjoy the companionship of a good friend. But your actions proved, once again, that friendship is overrated and impossible in self-centered generation.
Claire's stomach rolls as the liquid burns her insides. Barbara removes the red silk robe, and another is underneath. She places the first, which is still warm, onto Claire's body. Her jade green eyes glow with hatred, yet she's still smiling.
Belladonna is a strong hallucinogenic drug used in various pagan religious ceremonies for centuries. But of course, you already knew that. Just like you knew it grows wild here in the Kentucky hills, even during winter. You begged me to vacation here, but only after noticing me looking at cabins online, which I did on purpose. I must come here because it's where I've held the ceremony for centuries. I don't make the rules of the universe. I just follow them. I'm immune to belladonna. You are not. All I needed was for you to speak the oath in Latin, so it's all good.
You tricked me. Terror wells up inside Claire's throat. She tries forcing her muscles to obey the command to run, but nothing happens. Don't panic. This is just a hallucination or a dream. It isn't happening. Barbara's sinister laughter fills the cabin as her cold fingers grasp Claire's arm, steering her towards the door.
And you planned on killing me, so let's call the evening a draw. Oh, don't look so scared, sweetie. It'll be over soon. I promise. You know, I'm surprised you didn't notice the odor of the belladonna in your elixir. Some humans believe belladonna expands the mind, opening it up to new possibilities and avenues to connect to the universe with, which is possible. In your case, as well as all the others, I use it as a form of mind control. Dealing with irrational females drives me crazy.
The pressure from Barbara's strong grip around Claire's arm intensifies. A strange whooshing sound thrums inside her head, and she sees Barbara's lips move, but cannot hear anything. Her head suddenly feels heavy, and she's desperate to run, yet still unable to move. And suddenly, ebony darkness descends. Claire's eyes flutter open and soul-crushing panic seizes her chest. She immediately realizes she's in the glen from her dreams, the stone slab glowing brightly, bathing the entire area in blood red. Barbara stands over her, sheds her robe, and uses the dagger to slice off the one covering Claire's trembling body. Red glints off the tips of her nails, and her face contorts, elongating the once beautiful jade-green orbs into thin red slits, cheeks and forehead morphing into an unrecognizable mass of flesh with thin translucent skin pulsating with each heartbeat. The silvery blade sparkles in the reddish glow seeping from the rock underneath her body. Her fingers tingle and burn when Barbara places the dagger into her right hand. She wants to stab her nemesis or throw it away, but cannot stop herself from raising it high above her breasts. Please, don't make me do this. I'm begging you. I'm sorry for what I thought about doing, I swear. You're right. I was jealous of you, but I've seen the error of my ways, and I'll change. I promise. We'll find you someone else. I'll stay by your side, worship you, anything you want. But please, don't make me kill myself. I don't want to die.
Oh, it's too late for false apologies.
Barbara's lips curl into a feral snarl.
And trust me, I didn't want to be burned alive centuries ago, nor did I want to die tonight. So I promise to live out my best life with the years your death grants me.
Unable to force herself to stop, the dagger plunges into her chest. Claire's piercing wail reverberates throughout the quiet holler. A shimmering gray mist bursts from her mouth and nose, writhing in strange arcs above her head. The pain is overshadowed by bone-crushing cold. Barbara picks up the dagger and licks the sharp edge while inhaling what she now realizes is her life force.
Too bad you learned such important lessons about being careful what you put out into the universe, and whose life you covet. One just never knows who is really behind a media juggernaut, right? Many thanks for the years, sweetie. I'll make sure to tag you in an amazing tribute to my BFF online, whose eternal beauty will never fade.
Ty woke with a jolt. For one terrible moment, he could still feel the oily barrel of Lenny Dallas's automatic pressed to his forehead. He rubbed at the spot, and his breathing started to slow as he looked out into the hallway through the open bedroom door. Everything was silent, and with no electricity. The only light came from the failing streetlight outside, and the cell phone on the nightstand reading 4:30. Beside him, Shauna still slept peacefully, lost in the strange Percocet-flavored world she would doubtless tell him all about in the morning. Ty looked at her sagging green panties and the way she had tangled herself up with the sheets, and felt an urge to gather her to him, both to protect her and take comfort in her warmth. Protect her? Like you protected Reagan? He frowned at the unwelcome thought, and then dismissed it, Reagan was a long time ago. Shauna was who he was with now. She was who he had to worry about. With one finger, he touched a calf that was sticking out from a tangle of sheets and lightly followed the outline of Betty Page that was tattooed there. When they first met, he used to trace the delicate, vibrant tattoos that covered her body with his tongue. He loved following their curves and the sensual thrill that Shauna had taken from it. Now, as her skin had paled and taken on the waxy hue of serious addiction, the designs looked tired, and poor Betty, whose inky lips he had tasted in moments of passion, looked depressed. He brought his hand to rest on her ass and left it there, feeling her breathe. The warmth of her at least was comforting in the dark. She gave a loud snore and shifted under the sheets. He smirked. The pills didn't have that printed in their list of side effects. Caution may cause loss of sensuality, as you'll sound like a rusty chainsaw when you sleep. Suddenly, Ty wanted to shove Shauna hard, to roll her off the bed, to shock her. He took his hand away, took a breath, and counted to 10 in his head. There was a big reckoning coming over Shauna's drug use, but 4 in the morning was not the time to do it, especially when there were bigger pressures closing in around the two of them. And it's not all her fault, you asshole. There was truth in that as well. He gave Shauna's ass a gentle squeeze, then turned over and went back to sleep. Ty pulled the sheets up and tried to ignore the sound. It was probably something going on outside anyway. At least, he tried to convince himself of that. His sleep had been dreamless and restful for once, and he wasn't about to let it go easily. Except that it was coming from inside the house. He got up and padded into the hall, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his hand. Looking over the railing to the dark foyer below, Ty listened for the sound to come again. If he was lucky, it would be the cops. They might get turned out for squatting, probably fined too, though he was sure they'd left no trace of their entry. If it wasn't the cops, though. Christ, what are we doing here? He was fully awake now and cursing himself for thinking they had found a temporary respite from their problems. If being on the run had taught Ty anything, it was that he was reckless. Not fearless, not stoic. Reckless. Reckless people did stupid things. Being reckless was what led him from a bad position selling dope to a worse position owing for dope. And that led to the position he was in right now, where being busted by the cops for trespassing was the least of his worries. He crept down the stairs, holding the railing. If he tripped in the dark and broke something, he'd be as good as dead. Going to an emergency room would be the same as putting an ad on TV advertising their location. As the dark banister slid beneath his hand, his thoughts drifted back to his brief but happy time with Reagan here. They had fixed his staircase together. That had been one of the best weekends and had ended with the two of them covered in sawdust, drinking beer on the bottom step, and later making earnest, exhausted love on the living room floor. 4 months later, Everything had gone to shit.
You're hurting me.
When the banks collapsed in 2007, Ty's occasional drug use had developed into a full-time career. But the money he made selling the stuff was nowhere near enough to get out from under 2 crippling mortgages. It wasn't even enough to pay down a maxed-out line of credit and 6 different credit cards. He had had to walk away from the house he and Reagan had considered their forever home.
Please, Ty. Please.
Losing the house had been like pulling the plug in a boat. Everything started going down. Within weeks of the default, Reagan was gone too. He burned friends and family on short-term loans that went straight up his nose. Soon, everything that Ty had been working for, everything he'd been, was completely gone. What happened next was completely unexpected. With nothing left to lose, he had nothing left to prove. It was as if he had been bound in a straitjacket that he couldn't feel, only to be released from it one day, and realize then that he had been trapped. Being nothing was by far more intoxicating than anything he had ever peddled out of his car. The only person he owed anything to now was himself. And Leonard Dallas, of course. He had sold the last of his coke and kept all the cash, including Dallas's cut. Leonard Dallas, Ty knew, would give less than a shit about his new outlook on life.
Hurting me?
Ty left town. He had never talked about his past in front of the boss. Dallas knew he was from back east and nothing else. The gangster would eventually track him down, but staying where the risk of getting busted was sky high made the plan just crazy enough to work. For a little while at least. Or had it. Were Dallas's men just outside? Maybe Dallas had sent Gerard after him. That skinny psycho scared Ty almost as much as Dallas did. Ty stared at the door. It hadn't moved. The padlock was holding firm. And the sound wasn't coming from the Jimmy door at the back of the house either. He was scanning the living room, which was barely visible in the light that filtered through the boards on the window. A thought occurred to him. He ran back upstairs to the bedroom and looked inside. The bed was empty, and a pale blue glow was coming from the en-suite toilet. Shauna must be in there. She was forever running down her battery using the cell phone as a flashlight. He had told her over and over that there was no way to charge the thing in the house. Still, the noise had unnerved him a little, and he was glad to find her awake. "Shauna!" he called. There was no answer. He walked into the room. "Babe, you there? You hearing this noise?" Nothing. Ty went to the bathroom door. The phone was in there. Shauna wasn't. Still holding the phone, he ran back downstairs, forgetting his caution as annoyance turned to worry. If she was sleepwalking again. He reached the kitchen and stopped. The silence had coalesced into a dull and viscous hum. A car went by outside, and Ty jumped. Shauna wasn't down here either. His mind was churning. Normally, the oxy made her sleep straight through the night. but once or twice before, she had gone sleepwalking. There had been a brutal time a while back in Lubbock, Texas. They were holed up in a $60 motel room with a coin slot on the bed and grease stains on the wall. Their second night, Ty had woken to find the door open and Shauna gone. When he finally found her, she was naked and wading ever deeper into the algae-choked muck that used to be a swimming pool. He had shaken her roughly awake, and she had freaked out, screaming and clawing at him with her ragged, junky nails. It had taken an hour to get her to calm down and longer to get her back to bed. Ty hoped this wasn't another episode like that. Right now, though, he just wanted to find her. The banging came again, and his breath caught at the back of his throat. It was coming from the basement. His heart, already racing, began pounding in his ears. Now that he could hear the sound more clearly, he had a bitter gnawing sensation that he had heard the same noise before, and that he should recognize it. He opened the basement door and paused for a second. The streetlights coming through the boards on this level made it possible to see what was in front of him. In the cellar, it would be pitch black. What the hell was she doing down there? He realized at that moment that he was still holding Shauna's phone. With a tap of the screen, the phone lit up, and he could see the top 2 stairs directly in front of him. At the very least, he wouldn't break his neck before he found out what was going on. The steps creaked as he started down. That noise mixed with a fresh round of banging, and the final pieces of the memory he'd been chasing clicked together. Reagan. It couldn't be.
You're hurting me.
As if conjured by the thought of her name, Ty's last night in this house began to play out again, as it had in his nightmares ever since. He was high. He was always high now. It was the only thing that made sense to him, and the only thing, Reagan concluded, that gave him any relief from the increasing pile of shit he was facing. Where was it? Ty kicked aside the 2 moving boxes he had already torn apart into the darkest corner of the basement. Halfway through a third, he finally found a jewelry box. The tiny oak and ebony chest had sat on their dresser in the old house. Here, they were still finishing the renovations before they got the rest of the unpacking done. There was a tiny pewter key. Thankfully, it hadn't fallen out. Ty turned the key, and there, on top, was Great Granny's diamond necklace. He lifted it out.
What are you doing?
He jumped. When he turned, he saw Reagan wearing the sad little frown that dominated her expression so much these days. I'm selling these. Fuck it, he thought. No need to deny it now.
They're not yours to sell.
There wasn't the slightest bit of warmth in her voice.
You make me sick, Ty. Put those down.
And what do you suppose we'll do for money then, Reagan, huh? His temper, never far away when he was high, raged now. Reagan, to his surprise and increasing anger, didn't back down.
Maybe, Ty, if you sold more of that shit than you put up your nose, we wouldn't be in this position. Put those down now. She
yelled the last, matching his intensity. He had been in the process of slipping the necklace into his pocket. Now he flung it at her. She flinched and he lashed out with a fist, catching her high in the chest. Something snapped then. He wasn't even seeing Reagan anymore. His body had tasted what it was to hurt something, and he liked it. All the injustice, all the impotence he had felt came rushing out of him, and he threw punch after punch. Reagan stumbled back. Her head hit the water tank with a dull thud.
Please.
She said through sobs.
Please stop. You're hurting me.
It was such an absurd thing to say that it caused him to pause for a moment. But it was too late. The mixture of drugs and adrenaline had whipped him into a frenzy that couldn't be stopped now. He screamed and threw himself forward. The cellar reverberated with the sound of bone meeting metal. He shook his head. Over. Everything was over. Reagan was over. The stairs groaned as they took his weight. Cracked linoleum bit at his bare feet as he walked down. The flashlight picked out a hard white circle that shone on random details. A steel pillar. The gaping hole of a lidless drain. His old workbench. The sound was louder now, coming from the far corner, where the water heater stood. Ty took a deep breath. His sense of dread was nearly paralyzing, but he forced himself forward. A moment later, the light picked out a naked thigh, with a faded tattoo of Betty Page winking back at him. Shauna was facing the corner, wearing only the sagging green panties she had been sleeping in. Again and again, she slammed her forehead into the side of the hot water tank. There was a large bloody smear at the point of contact. He came around to the side and shone the light at her face. Shauna's eyes were rolled up to the whites. Her jaw hung slack. Ty felt sick. It wasn't as if she was about to knock herself unconscious. She was already unconscious. There was a terrible impression of concavity to her brow, but it was hard to make out anything in the mass of swelling, bruises, and flowing blood that had replaced his lover's face. She reared back to butt the heater again. "Stop!" he shouted, putting a hand out to catch her forehead as it swung. She kept going and mashed his hand back against the metal. He cried out, then grabbed Shauna by the shoulders and shook her. "Wake up! For God's sake, wake up!" Shauna's eyes flew open, and she screamed. It was a feral, primal sound. Her hand came up into the light, holding the adjustable chrome wrench from his tool bench. The thing was the size of a baseball bat, and had been his best friend when he used to screw around fixing his car. He hadn't been able to find it before the move and had regretted leaving it behind. Now, here it was again, swinging two-handed in a heavy arc towards his face. Ty threw up a hand and caught Shauna's wrist. She was shaking with the effort to hit him, and screaming, still screaming. The wrench was wobbling back and forth. "Shauna, babe, it's me!" he screamed. She pulled free, swung hard, and connected with his jaw. The basement went darker. Ty woke up. His jaw was throbbing in time with his pulse. He touched his face and withdrew his fingers with a wince. The flesh there felt spongy and hot. The phone screen was still glowing beside him, but was now starting to grow dim. He stood up and staggered back to the stairs. He could see bloody footprints stamped on the linoleum all the way up. Shauna. What the fuck? Upstairs, the front door was open. Pieces began to come together in his mind. It was the drugs. Had to be. Something inside Shauna's head had finally gone bad. At some point during her episode, she must have crossed the final border between sleepwalking and psychosis. There was no sign of her having gone outside. How far could she have gone with her face in such a disastrous state? It was a wonder she had still been on her feet when he had found her, let alone strong enough to attack him. So where was she? He stepped outside on the cold interlocking brick walkway. The street was empty, but he felt horribly exposed. There was no blood out here. His brain, so recently rattled, was trying to catch up to the moment and reason out what he was seeing. If Shauna was still in the grip of her nightmares, she couldn't have reasoned well enough to go upstairs, get the padlock key from his pocket, and return downstairs with it to open the hasp and leave. If she had woken up, she'd almost certainly be lying somewhere, screaming in pain with what she had done to herself. So, if Shauna hadn't opened the door, Dallas. It had to be Dallas's men. Ty went back into the house and sprinted up the stairs 2 at a time. He stopped dead in front of the bedroom door. There was blood on the floor. Every part of him wanted to flee, to get in his car and drive until everything started to make sense again. But he wouldn't get far in just his boxers. He had a clear mental picture of his key ring sitting in its usual place, in the front right pocket of his jeans. With luck, his wallet would be in the back pocket, and he could just grab the pants and get out of here. His heart was pounding. In the muted light from the window, he saw that his pants were crumpled by the side of the bed near the bathroom floor. Without another thought, he ran into the room, intent on grabbing the jeans. The silence of the room was split with a bowel-chilling scream of rage behind him. He whipped his head around to see Shauna staggering out of the bathroom. Blood had poured over her skin, coating her breasts, belly, and panties. Her face was like rotten liver, and her mouth gaped open in its moment of feral triumph. He put an arm up to defend himself as she swung the wrench again. Pain like liquid lightning shot through his arm as the bone shattered. The blow had enough momentum that the head of the wrench still connected with the top of his head, leaving him dazed. He sat down hard. His own blood started flowing, running into his eyes. With his uninjured hand, he tried to clear it and realized there were bright spots blooming there as well. He was going to pass out. If he did, he'd die. Shauna reared back for another attempt.
Enough.
It was another woman's voice. In his semi-conscious state, Ty couldn't recognize the speaker, but whoever it was had attracted Shauna's wrath away from him. She screamed again. Ty passed out to the sound of the wrench hitting bone. When Ty came to, he was lying in bed. His injured arm, now swollen to the size of a roast beef, lay on his stomach. His jaw was throbbing, and his head felt worse. The pillow felt sticky against his cheek. Shauna. Where was Shauna? He turned his head, wincing and fighting through waves of pain. There, beside the bed, was the mangled ruin that had been his girlfriend. Mercifully, she was face down in a puddle of her own blood and hair. Something touched his injured arm, and he screamed.
Welcome home, lover.
The voice was the second woman he had heard before everything went black. There was a low chuckle, and then...
She seemed nice.
As Ty rolled over, he knew what he was going to see, though his whole being screamed against it. Reagan was lying next to him, a cold white hand on his arm. She was naked. Even her face was unblemished. Outside of all rational thought, his body began to respond to her touch. She brought her other hand to rest on his chest. It was still holding the bloody wrench. "How?" was what he wanted to say. Nothing came out. Reagan seemed to understand anyway.
You left me here, Ty. Left me in our dream house. Our house.
He worked his lips, trying to form sounds. Nothing was working. Reagan laid a finger on his lips.
It is our forever home. Remember?
Ty nodded.
Well, darling,
she cooed, still using the same calm, almost sensual tone.
I came back to look for you when we got separated. And when you didn't come, I decided to wait.
Ty's voice broke loose of his trembling lips. I killed...
You broke my heart,
said Reagan.
But now you're back, and we can be happy again. Forever.
Shauna? Reagan smiled. It was a smile he had seen countless times before, when she had pointed out something that should be blatantly obvious to him. He had always thought of it as her, "Oh, you silly boy" smile.
I told you I've been waiting, Ty. I've only had our house to talk to. And after a while, it listened.
She smiled again.
Not long after that, it started talking back.
Reagan touched the end of his nose. He stifled a scream.
It didn't like being left alone either,
she said, stroking the wall.
We're friends now.
With a sudden flicker of movement, like the stutter of a television signal, Reagan was suddenly standing next to Shauna's body.
Your friend heard us talking, I think.
Reagan shoved the corpse with her foot. Shauna's body was limp and moved away from the ground with a horrible squelching sound. Looking back at him, Reagan said,
I don't think she was all that stable, Ty.
She took her foot away and Shauna's body fell back against the sodden carpet with an almost soundless thump.
I found her in the basement. This place is full of memories. And she got kind of trapped down there. Though what she could have been seeing, I couldn't say.
A flicker. Reagan was back in bed with him.
Do you have any idea what she saw?
Ty shook his head. She sighed.
Whatever it was, I think it broke her mind.
She smiled and looked Ty in the eye. Her irises had become so pale blue they were almost white.
Lucky for you, I stopped her before she broke yours.
Suddenly, Ty was aware of footsteps downstairs. There were at least 2 people walking around on the hardwood. Check it out and call in. What if he's here? Kill him and call in. Gerard said to call either way. Ty tried to sit up. Reagan pushed him back. Her hands were like ice coated in silk.
Where are you going, Ty?
She asked. He was frantic, but there was no time to waste. But what could he do? Reagan frowned.
Don't leave me again, Ty. Don't.
The steps grew louder. They were coming up the stairs. Reagan seemed to notice.
I see. Your friends are here.
Yeah, cried Ty, trying to keep his voice as low as possible. They're going to kill me, Reagan. She smiled.
That's wonderful, Ty.
He stopped moving. What?
They'll have guns, right?
He nodded.
Then someone will hear and eventually they'll come take the bodies away.
Leaning in, she kissed him on the mouth with hard, implacable lips. She seemed to be sucking the breath out of him. When she broke the kiss, she whispered in his ear.
Then it can just be you and me again, in our forever home.
I hear something up here. The voice came from the top of the steps. Tears started rolling down Ty's cheeks. He looked at Reagan and whispered, I don't want to die. Reagan's body flickered once more, and she was straddling him. In the bedroom. Let's go.
Make love to me, Ty.
I can't, he wanted to say. His body said otherwise. She flickered, and they were together.
Be with me, Ty.
She moaned, moving her hips.
Let go of your fear.
Metal on metal clicking. A bullet being chambered.
Love me, Ty. Love me now.
Ty closed his eyes and reached out to his wife. She clasped her fingers around his.
Add a double with cheese, please. Patrick leaned in close to me from the passenger seat. Can you add a Coke to that, too? I leaned out. Can we, have a Coke, too, please? I looked back at Patrick, who made a hand gesture, pulling his hands away from each other quickly. A large, please. We serve Pepsi products, is that okay? Patrick made a face. Nah, skip the drink, please. Okay, the total on the screen, correct? I was about to answer when Patrick rolled his eyes and pointed past the screen. Oh, jeez, another one of them? It's the second time this month I've seen somebody hanging around. Over by the locked front entrance, a guy, clearly not doing well for himself, if not exactly homeless, was trying to flag us down. Hey, can you help? Not looking for money, just need some food. From the seat behind me, Jim shook his head. Just get him something. It's late at night, the place is closed, he probably doesn't have a car. I looked at Jim in the rearview mirror as he took it upon himself to remind me why he always sat in the back seat of the car whenever we went somewhere. Patrick, it's your card. You want to do it? Hell no. We're already ordered. You can wait for the next person in line. You can't keep doing this. They just know people will pay for them, and all they do is show up all the time. And then they just bother everybody instead of getting real jobs. Jim folded his arms, a determined look on his face. Or at least from what I could see in the rear view, he tried to have a determined look. Maybe he does have a real job, Pat. He just doesn't have a car. Then how'd he get here? I don't see a bike. He just had someone drop him off so he can get free food. It's all a scam, and it's guys like you that keep it going. Your choice, Pat. All I know is, if I was starving, I'd like somebody to offer. Jim, if you were starving, you'd be out with resume in hand, showering at the Y, going to a soup kitchen to eat. Because you're a nerd like that. Don't make me be the bad guy here. While they bickered, I just watched the guy wave once more. I waved back and gave a non-committal shrug. Sorry, man. It's my buddy's card and we have to get back. The guy put his hands down and seemed a little defeated, but repeated God bless a few times before pacing. Yeah, Jim, I think I'll have to agree with Pat this time. This guy seems a little out of it. I don't want him near the car. People like that need the help most. He's not going to go to a soup shelter. He probably doesn't even know where he is. The speaker crackled. Sir, is the order on the screen correct? Right. Yes, everything looks fine. I wanted to kick myself for getting our order was right on screen. We drove on, paid the lady at the window, then waited for a few moments while they got the bag prepared for us. I watched them place the greasy, paper-wrapped sandwiches in a bag, and suddenly, a late-night burger run didn't sound quite so wonderful. I think I'll just give him my sandwich. I don't even really want it. Pat sighed, then punched the ceiling of the car. You do that, and he'll just be back here tomorrow night. He won't go away. I shrugged. Hey, he eats tonight, and there are loitering laws still in place, right? Win-win for everybody. We got our food, and as we drove past the parking lot again, I saw the guy stumbling around and mumbling something to himself. Having not yet rolled the window up, I waved him over and handed him my sandwich. He thanked me, nodded his head a few dozen times, then went back to what he was doing, now just with food. I couldn't make out much of his mumbling, but what I could sounded like he was reciting some kind of oath, over and over. Not something mystical sounding. The more I listened, the more I was sure it was the post office creed. We got back on the road which led back to Pat's house, having driven through old, quiet neighborhood back roads to get our burgers. I wasn't used to driving near downtown, but Pat insisted this place had great food, even though I'd never heard of it. Considering he didn't know they sold Pepsi products, I wondered if he was telling me the whole truth, or if we drove all the way out here in the middle of the night, when we were already content to watch movies and pass out on the couch, after a good night of drinking and laughing, to do something else. So, Pat, are we out just for burgers, or... Hang on. He rustled through the bag. You better not have given him mine. Oh, wait, there it is. He took a quick bite, and by the face he made, I knew for certain he'd just picked a random burger place to visit. Just like I remembered. Make a left up here. Almost missing the road he was pointing at, I squealed the tires, trying to make the turn. Thankfully, this was the kind of area where most cops weren't likely to just be sitting in a parked car, waiting to catch speeders. Warn me next time, okay? Jim looked out the side window, and I could see growing alarm in his eyes. Despite Pat referring to him as a nerd, Jim wasn't, really. He was probably the most athletic among us, and he was the only one without glasses, compared to the two of us up front. Still and all, he was a friend, even if he was a determined killjoy, and had rightfully earned his place in the back seat with all of his griping and finger-pointing. This isn't the way back. You got the wrong street. No, we're going the right way. We're not going back to my place. Then where are we? Pat smiled, put his still-wrapped burger between his legs, and reached into his pocket for a roll of dollar bills. Wait, no, we're not. Hell yeah, baby. Boys' night out. I just got a promotion, and drinks and entertainment are all on me. I didn't want to go. I'm guessing Jim didn't want to go either, but when Pat made up his mind about something, we all got dragged along into it. So I sighed. Fine, which road? I'll put it into my GPS. Jeez, don't get so excited about it now. No, congrats, man. I'm glad you're now... What is it you're doing again? I started clicking on my GPS app, but in big red letters, it informed me I could not put in the address while I was driving. Hang on, I have to stop the car. Pat, not really paying attention, started in on how he was now minor management, and yes, he would misuse his power as much as he could, because that was the kind of guy I was. Jim, on the other hand, squeezed the back of my seat. Brakes! I heard the thud reverberated through the car, and I slammed my brakes on. What the hell was that? Jim was still squeezing the headrest. Some guy looked like he was drunk. He stepped out onto the road. I felt my heart tighten, my fingers grow cold. I'd hit somebody. Perfect driving record, never even hit a squirrel. And now I'd run over somebody crossing the street. I stopped the car, opened the door, and made sure I had the keys in the pocket. The last thing I needed was for them to disappear somewhere if things got really bad. We all got out, and in the headlights, we saw what we assumed was a man in a thick black trench coat. I say assume because he was huge. It wasn't like a fat huge or bodybuilder huge or even tall huge. He was just all around big, like when kids play with action figures that aren't to scale. I felt like a G.I. Joe next to Stretch Armstrong or something. I wasn't sure at first if he was dead or alive. Either way, this was bad, but dead would have been... Well, that would make things a whole lot worse. Then I saw the coat rising and falling, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I looked at my two friends, who sort of nodded and shrugged as if to say, yeah, if you're going to do something, go ahead, but we'll be back here while you do it. I gulped, then moved toward the coat-covered mound in the road. Sir, are you okay? Can you hear me? Can you tell me if anything hurts? The breathing continued, but there was no response. I looked around at the area nearby. The houses here were burnt out, long abandoned, or inhabited by squatters looking to smoke a few rocks or shoot up. If we couldn't get an ambulance out here, I don't think it would be possible for him to fit in my car and take him somewhere that he could find help. I figured the best thing to do would be to call 911, so I got my phone out. I imagined again, for a moment, that someone would try and stop me, argue that none of this was worth it, and that it would be best if we just left. Then I remembered that this wasn't a movie, and despite how my friends bickered and argued, they weren't stupid, and they knew as well as I did that running away from something like this was just about the worst thing we could do. I called the dispatcher, who took my name and reminded me to be calm. Unfortunately, I couldn't recall the name of the street we were on, and Pat only knew where we were going, not how to get there. They just said to remain calm and wait, and emergency personnel would be there soon. I kept my phone on and relayed everything to the other two when we heard the man grunt. It was a deep, rumbling grunt, and immediately I tried again. Sir, excuse me, sir, are you all right? The man grunted once more, then said something in a low voice, his back still to us. I'm fine. Just a little hungry. To my surprise, Pat went back to the car and got his burger. So much for his values of not helping those less fortunate. Here, man, have this. Look, no hard feelings, okay? We were just going along and we just didn't see you. You need money or something, too? As he handed the burger down to the man on the ground, his arm shot up, snatching the burger from Pat's hand. There was a very loud and unpleasant slurping sound as he finished the meal, apparently in only a few seconds. Having had the burger and the wrapper crunched and tossed aside, the man stood. As I suspected, I was absolutely right. He was massive, not just tall, but wide as well. No, I don't need any money. I just need food. At this, the man turned toward Pat and grabbed him forcefully, two large, meaty hands wrapping around both his shoulder and his side. Pat began to scream. I stumbled forward to try and grab him, but of all things, Jim pulled me back. Jesus, look at him. The man had a thick, jowly face, and from his lower lip, two tusk-like teeth jutted. His eyes were small but bright red, looking almost like every blood vessel had blown in them at the same time. His nose was small but turned upward, like a pig or boar. He might have been a man, after all, but I've never seen a human being that looked like him before. I had to do something to rescue Pat from his thing's clutches, but before I could break free from Jim's grasp, the monster man had already opened its gigantic mouth and closed it on Pat's shoulder. I expected it to maybe swallow him whole or to rip him apart. Both would have been preferable to what actually happened. In the moment the thing bit him, Pat's scream began to warble and drop in tone, like the very sound was melting. His color drained, becoming paler by the second, until he was pure alabaster white. His body flopped, the bones and muscle seemingly vanishing, or more likely, reduced to nothing but goo. Even as he appeared to, melt wasn't the right word. It was more like he deflated, like a balloon at a birthday party with a sudden leak. The moan still hung from his lips as the thing pulled him and slipped him into its mouth, clothes and all. And like that, my friend of nearly 15 years was just gone. There one moment, choking and making light of things, and a moment later vanishing into the maw of some gigantic creature like a piece of spaghetti. It then turned to look at both of us. I just need a little more. Please help me. I felt the grip on me loosen as Jim began to pull me away, though I didn't want to go. Not that I wanted to be the feast of this piggish monster, but that it made more sense to get back in the car and drive out of there before anything happened to the two of us. But I now saw, as it strode toward us, we would never have survived. Its long arms could have easily smashed the window and pulled us out, turning us into whatever it was that it called a meal. I followed Jim, blindly at first, toward the back of one of the houses. We rounded a corner, hoping to find a locked-in door, or a shed, or a raised back porch we could hide under. What we found instead was a backyard with grass nearly 3 feet high, filled with discarded, rusty junk, including an old refrigerator and car parts. Oh, and the board with the rusty nail in it. Jim found that one about 3 steps in. He screamed and clutched his wounded foot, the board still stuck on the bottom of the shoe. I tried to remove it, but he waved me away. I'll just walk on it. We can't slow down. It'll get us. We could hear him coming. It was, thankfully, slower than we were, or at least it gave the impression it was. We ran into the yards of at least a dozen houses until we found one that had the sort of raised porch we were looking for. Jim played with a loose piece of trellis that we could slide back into place, and thus, once we got through, we could make it look like it hadn't been touched. We slid it in, and together we moved into the back of the porch, close to the cement wall that made up the outer wall of the house. After a moment, we heard it stalking closer, could see the movement of its legs as it wandered along in search of its next target. We watched the shadows on the trellis board bend and shift until, at last, it went to move on. We waited for the sounds to retreat before we even thought to move. Jim moved first, scrabbling forward toward the broken trellis, to undo it when I suddenly heard loud stomping coming from the house behind me. Above, the door smashed in, and with sudden violence, 2 arms punched through the deck flooring. The hands wrapped around Jim, and he was lifted with ease. "Got you. You forget how much you smell to me." I didn't see the process this time, but I could hear it as Jim experienced whatever had happened at Pat. The horrible noises followed by the slurping sounds. I did not move from the spot I was in, but I was vaguely aware that I was gathering up dust and throwing it on myself. I was in a sort of fugue state, having experienced something in one night that should not have been, and was letting my mind go on autopilot. I fell down into the dirt, and as I heard it stomping, trying to find where I'd gone, I didn't recall much until I woke up. I don't know if I'd fainted or just fallen asleep, but the trampling sound was long gone, followed by the muffled sound of talking. I quietly slid towards the hole in the porch, trying to get out, but also trying to determine where the noise was coming from. After assuring myself that nothing was going to grab me, when I put up my head and threw, I listened once more. It sounded like someone talking to a dispatcher, the ambulance I'd called. I pulled myself out and ran to it, finding my way through the maze of houses, until I saw my car in the blinking lights. I don't even recall what I said to them, as my thoughts were still haunted by the way that thing had swallowed my friends. But I do know that sometime after I was talking to them, a police car pulled up and asked me, only slightly, not that politely, to accompany them to the station. And here now I sit, in a room with very unpleasant lighting. Within a few minutes, a detective comes in, sits down, and asks me questions. Questions about the friends that were with me. Questions about the sounds that came over my phone. The phone that I didn't hang up when the dispatcher called. That caught our screams, the panicked running. The sounds of my friends turning into some kind of mush before it ate them. The detective looks at me. "Look, we know that something happened tonight, but we need your help to piece it all together. But we need you to calm down and look at it rationally. If you're currently on any sort of narcotics, you should let us know." "I wasn't drinking. I don't do drugs. I saw what I saw." "I understand. But if we're going to have any chance of catching the man who kidnapped your friends, we need to know the truth. They're not kidnapped. They're dead. He ate them." "Yes, we know what you think you saw, but it's just not possible to have happened the way you describe. Look, if you need some time to collect your thoughts, we have a room here where you can sleep it off. Maybe you'll remember better then." I clenched my fingers, but I also nodded, understanding they will never believe this story. I watch him as he rises, gives me a pat on my shoulder, then returns to his duties outside. I put my head in my hands and wonder if maybe he's right, that maybe what I saw was too outlandish, that it was the state of a panicked mind, that the material on the phone call had a different explanation. And then I look outside the room, and I see the detectives have ordered a late-night early morning meal. The one who was just speaking to me selects a carton of something either Thai or Chinese. He opens it and proceeds to scoop noodles out of it. Thick, wide noodles. And he slurps as they go into his mouth. And before I lose consciousness again, I feel my whole world shatter.
"We will be safe there?" the boy asks. The roar of the powerful outboard motor echoes through the flood-ravaged streets of Old Manhattan as I pilot the boat down the center of what used to be Fifth Avenue. Water laps at the facades of the submerged structures, spraying a fine mist into the cold night air. I glance down at the child. He's young, no older than 10. with straight black hair and dark brown skin. The way his bangs flop over his forehead reminds me of myself as a child. Of course, I lie. You'll love it. The boy's mother shoots me a nervous glance, then puts her arm around her son and whispers into his ear in a foreign tongue. The boy nods. He rests his head on her shoulder. She hugs him tighter and kisses the top of his salt-crusted hair. A gust of freezing wind whips between the buildings. All around, the remains of skyscrapers jut from the water like ancient monoliths, hollow paeans to long-dead gods, their once towering heights clipped short by the rising tides. An empty flagpole protrudes from one of them, a spear in the heart of a dying giant. Smears of rust cascade down the stone from the corroded metal base like bloodstains from a mortal wound. I look up at our destination, a black glass facade looming in the distance. It's dark, except for a ring of light spilling from the top-floor windows. The penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling shades in every window prevent people outside from seeing in and people inside from having to see out. Behind the shades, a pair of silhouettes move fluidly past the glass, separating, spinning, then coming back together again, arms intertwining, bodies swaying, dual shadows merging into a single, multi-limbed form. Christ, I think. Are they dancing? I can't remember the last time I saw anyone dancing. It seems almost sacrilegious after all that's happened. The floods, the droughts, the fires. Millions dead, millions more starving. And yet those bastards up there are dancing, as if everything's okay, as if all this is normal, as if it's just another day. Unbelievable, I mutter. A ghostly white glow briefly illuminates the boat as it passes a giant "Do Not Enter" sign. The warnings are everywhere, cautioning people against entering the flooded city. The water is getting deeper. That's the first problem. A few months ago, it was a foot or two below the sign. Now, half the sign is gone. It won't be long before the whole city is underwater, penthouses and all. And then what? My hand unconsciously brushes the gun tucked into my belt. I've never needed to use it, but I carry it just in case. The rising tide isn't the only risk. There are looters, hijackers, junkies. But what truly worries me aren't the dangers above the water. It's the ones below. I've never seen the things, but I have heard about them. About what they do to anyone who strays too close to the water's edge. Nobody knows what they are or where they came from. There are plenty of reasonable theories, ranging from previously undiscovered ocean predators to mutant strains of new species to long-extinct dinosaurs thawed from the Arctic ice. Then there are the crackpot rumors, escaped genetic experiments, government bioweapons, mermaids, aliens, zombies. I don't know what to think. Part of me wants to believe that the things don't exist at all, that they're just boogeymen that parents wield to warn their kids away from the water. But another part of me finds it hard to ignore the screams that echo through the city at night, or the blooms of blood and viscera that sometimes bubble up from the depths. A gruff voice breaks me out of my reverie. It's my business partner, Alex. He's standing with one foot perched on the bow of the boat, like George Washington crossing the Delaware River. "Yo, Jeremy, slow it down!" The beam from a flashlight strobes in my eyes. I wave it away. "Relax, I'm on it." I kill the motor. Its dying rumble ricochets off the walls of the urban canyon and rolls into the distance. The only sound that remains is the soft slap of water against the hull and the occasional cough from one of the 20 refugees crowded into the overloaded transport. The faint strains of what sounds like a waltz filter down from the penthouse above. The boat bumps against the 46th floor window of the skyscraper with a squeal like the death throes of a dying machine. Moving quickly, Alex loops a heavy, mildew-blackened rope in through one broken window and out the next, lashing the boat to the wide steel beam that separates them. Then he turns and faces the passengers. 20 hopeful faces look up at him expectantly. They're starving, desperate, scared. They'll believe anything. And they have. Alex clears his throat and projects his voice. "All right, everyone, listen up," he says. "I'm gonna run inside to see if your rooms are ready. You're all paid up, right?" Heads nod. Alex points at the boy who talked to me earlier. "You too, little man?" The boy looks up at his mother. She nods her approval, and he gives Alex a thumbs up. "Great!" Alex claps his hands together. "Then I'll be right back." He grabs the rope ladder dangling against the side of the building, then smiles down at the faces below. "You're gonna love it here." With that, he climbs up the ladder and disappears through a window a few feet above the water. Fucking asshole, I think. Why'd he have to do that with the kid? What was the point? It was just cruel. Alex seemed to have a twisted need to prove that he was still an alpha male, still a captain of industry, still at the top of the food chain. In a way, he is. We both are. I've known Alex for years. We met as freshmen at Texas A&M University, joined the MBA program at Wharton together, traded commodities at the same investment bank, even dated some of the same girls. Alex was an asshole back then, too. I'm originally from Texas. I majored in geological engineering with plans to join the oil industry when I graduated. But then, a recruiter for a major investment bank convinced me that I could make way more money trading oil futures in the stock market than I could make drilling holes in the Texas desert. The recruiter was right. Alex grew up in Nebraska, spending most of his childhood on his family's cattle ranch. He too had heard the siren song of Wall Street calling after graduation, and he too ultimately fell back on what he knew best. For him, it was livestock. Instead of herding cows on a farm in Nebraska, he was trading cattle futures from an office tower in Manhattan. It didn't matter to him. Either way, the livestock ended up in the same place, the slaughterhouse, then the dinner table. The beef industry was a big machine, a meat grinder that ingested living things on one end and spat gushers of money out the other. Alex was all too happy to collect it. When the shit hit the fan, Wall Street was one of the first things to go. The economy collapsed. Commerce broke down. Supply chains disintegrated. Food became scarce for everyone but the wealthiest few, housing too. Soon, it was every man for himself. It was Alex who came up with the plan. To him, it was obvious what we needed to do to survive. It was just an extension of what he was doing before the world went to hell. It was the same machine, just smaller, and we'd have to operate both ends. "Think of them like commodities," Alex had argued when he pitched the idea to me. "Like livestock." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was insane. Livestock? They're people! Alex walked over to the window of our darkened apartment, his shoes squelching on the waterlogged carpet as he crossed. The rug was sodden and mildewed. Black mold climbed the furniture and walls. The smell of rot was nauseating. He looked out across the darkened cityscape. Like most of the city, except for the penthouses, Our place had no electricity anymore. We were lucky enough that it was still above the water. It wouldn't be for long, though. The high tide was already sloshing against the bottom of our windows. "This place is fucked," Alex said. He thumped the toe of his sneaker against the glass at the waterline. "We need an agent, and agents cost money." Alex was right. There were only so many buildings still above the water, and more were being flooded every day. An agent would find us a new place and would do the dirty work of evicting the current occupants. But that kind of service didn't come cheap. The higher the apartment, the higher the price. Plus, there was the cost of eviction and the resulting cleanup. If the occupants left peacefully, it wouldn't be too bad. But if they didn't, well, they would have to be convinced. The agents would do what they had to do to clear the property, but it could get messy, and that was expensive. I joined Alex at the window and gazed out at the remains of the darkened skyscrapers. Their penthouse lights glowed like the tips of lit cigars. "You think it's true what they're eating up there?" "I know it is." "How?" "You remember Gary Benjamin?" I nodded. Gary Benjamin had been the head chef at Prime Cut, one of the city's premier steakhouses. Alex and I used to wine and dine our Wall Street clients over fist-sized cuts of Gary's divinely marbled $300 Wagyu steak. We had gotten to know him over the years. He was a smart guy, talented, the best chef in the city, if you believed the critics that ranked that kind of thing. He's a personal chef now, in that one. Alex pointed at the black glass skyscraper towering over the drowned remains of Fifth Avenue. "And he's buying." I sit alone in the boat, waiting and listening. I've made the trip enough times to recognize the sounds of what's happening inside. It's always the same thing. First, there are murmurs of confusion and concern as the refugees begin to realize they've been lied to. Someone, usually a man, starts shouting in protest. There's a struggle, then gunshots. The screams follow. Sometimes there are more gunshots, sometimes not. It depends on how unruly things get. Eventually, the panic simmers down to a steady drone of quiet weeping and whispered prayers. The adults are shuttled up the dank stairwell to the 49th floor for immediate processing. The kids are herded into individual pens on the 48th, where they're held until they're needed. None of them really know what's in store for them. They're kept in the dark, literally and figuratively. I've never been inside the building. I don't have the stomach for it. Alex does, though. Somehow, he's unfazed by the whole thing. He goes up to the kitchen to chat with Gary Benjamin as Gary preps the penthouse's next meal, knowing full well where the cuts of meat on the chopping block came from. A flash of movement overhead catches my eye, and I look up. The boy from the boat, the one who spoke to me only minutes earlier, is in the window, pounding on the glass. His face is a mask of pure terror. Panicked, the boy looks over his shoulder, then down at me. Our eyes connect. The boy screams, his lips forming two words that I easily understand, even through the thick, soundproof glass. "Help me." Before I can react, Alex appears behind the boy and grabs him by the arms. The kid struggles to break free, but Alex is too strong. He drags the boy, kicking and screaming, away from the window and into the darkness. A few minutes later, the rope ladder rattles against the side of the building as Alex climbs down. "Sorry about that," Alex says as he lowers himself into the boat. "Damn kid slipped away when we weren't looking." He wipes his hands on the back of his pants, then begins untying the rope that secures the boat to the building. I notice a spray of blood splattered across the front of Alex's yellow rain slicker. Crimson streaks that look like finger tracks are smeared down one of his sleeves. "Good news, though," Alex continues as he coils the rope. He's beaming. "We're in." I don't respond. I'm still staring at the bloodstains, my eyes unfocused. "You hear what I said?" Alex asks. "They have a vacancy." He loops the coiled rope onto a rusted metal hook protruding from the side of the boat. "Isn't that great?" "Yeah," I say quietly, groggily, as if waking from a deep slumber. Alex frowns. "Hey, what's your problem?" I look up at the window where I saw the kid calling for help. It's dark. I glance back at Alex. "I'm done," I say. I stand up and press the outboard motor's electric starter. The engine sputters but doesn't catch. "Done? Done what?" I motion to the building. "This." I press the starter again. Everything. The engine roars to life, spitting a cloud of pale gray exhaust into the air. Hang on, Alex shouts over the noise. "Shut that shit off!" I ignore Alex, revving the engine louder and piloting the boat away from the side of the building in a U-turn. "Shut it off, I said!" Alex shouts over the noise. He pushes past me, slams his hand down on the starter, and kills the engine. "What the hell are you talking about? You're done!" I look down at my shoes. I don't want to do it anymore. Alex glares at me for a moment, his arms crossed over his chest. The muscles in his jaw ripple as he clenches his teeth. Then he nods. His tone lightens. Okay. I lift my head, my eyebrows raised in surprise. Really? Sure, we'll just stop. And then, when our apartment floods and one of those things comes swimming through the door looking for its next meal, I'll make sure it knows where to find you. My eyes narrow. Fuck you. Don't you get it? Alex asks. We're this close to making it up there. He points to the penthouse. I snort derisively. They're not going to help us. They don't give a shit about us. We're just useful to them. Yeah, exactly. That gives us leverage. We can make a deal. A laugh bursts from my lips, echoing off the buildings towering around us. It's a hollow, joyless sound. They're dancing up there. So you don't get to where they are by sharing. Hell, that's why we're in this shit show in the first place. I gesture to the water that's overtaken the city. They didn't know when to stop, when enough was enough, and now we're stuck in this mess that they created. But them? I look up at the penthouse. They're still dry. They have electricity, clean water, food. They're above it all, literally. Exactly, which is why we need to be up there too. But that's their whole scam. The American dream, right? If you just work for us hard enough, someday all this can be yours. It's bullshit. It was always bullshit. What, you're Karl Marx now? Christ, listen to you. You sound like a fucking communist. Look, do what you want, I sigh. But like I said, I'm done. I try to step around Alex and back to my position by the engine. Alex moves to block my way. His lips curl away from his teeth in a snarl. No, he growls. You're done when I say you're done. He moves forward until we're almost nose to nose. Got it? I plant a forearm in Alex's chest, pushing him away to create space between us. Back off, I warn. What are you gonna do? Alex shoves me. Huh? The blow unleashes something deep inside of me. Before I can stop myself, I thrust my head forward, crushing my forehead into Alex's face in a vicious headbutt. Alex grunts as blood erupts from his busted nose. He spins around and bends forward over the boat's railing, leaking bright tendrils of blood into the jewel-green waves.
The hell, man? You broke my nose!
As Alex tries to staunch the bleeding with his shirt, the water beside the boat begins roiling and foaming. A cluster of ghostly white blurs materialize in the oily darkness, like wisps of gauze dancing lazily just below the surface. Suddenly, a mottled grayish-white hand shoots out of the water. It clutches Alex's arm and yanks, causing his midsection to crash against the railing and knocking the wind out of his lungs. Another hand shoots from the water. Flaccid ribbons of flesh are strung between its bony fingers like party streamers. Its yellowed nails dig into the shoulder of Alex's jacket and pull him headfirst into the water. Alex's startled screams turn into muffled gurgling. His arms flail helplessly at the thing in the water. He tries to tear away the limbs gripping at him, but the rotting flesh sloughs off in his hands. Overcoming my initial shock, I lunge forward and grab Alex's belt, digging my heels into the bottom of the boat and leaning back, putting all of my weight into pulling Alex away from whatever is attacking him. I can feel the thing tugging hungrily at my friend, trying to draw him fully out of the boat and under the waves. My grip begins to slip. Veins in my neck and forehead bulge as I struggle to hang on. The muscles in my back and shoulders scream from the strain. The belt tears at my fingers. Then, suddenly, the things in the water let go. With the resistance gone, I topple backward, landing flat on my back with Alex's body on top of me. I roll to the side, gasping for breath, then push Alex away and struggle to my knees. I look down at my friend. His face is gone. All that's left is a shredded, red-black hole, just a masticated mess of flesh and bone. The remnants of his lower jaw hang toward his neck, his bottom teeth poking up through the torn flesh of his lips and gums like broken seashells in a rising tide of gore. Torrents of blood bubble up from his severed arteries and pool in the cavity where his mouth used to be. I recoil with revulsion, vomit spewing from my lips. Alex is making gurgling sounds, his legs and arms twitching weakly. Somehow, he's still alive. His head lolls toward me. Blood spills from his ruined face and swirls into the water around my boots. The mangled stump of his tongue pokes and wiggles obscenely over the entrance to his torn esophagus. He seems to be trying to say something. One of his arms lifts, reaching in my direction, fingers grasping blindly. They find my arm and tighten around it. My feet slip on the blood-slicked metal floor as I stumble backward from Alex's grip. I fall hard, my head cracking painfully into the edge of the bench behind me. The floor under me begins to tilt, sending a noxious mixture of water, blood, and vomit sloshing past my cheek. Just above my head, a rotting hand grips the railing. Another arm emerges from the depths and latches a hand onto the rail, further tipping the vessel. Then another arm emerges, and another. One of the arms is still clad in the moldering remnants of a long-sleeved shirt. It reaches for me. I kick at it, hearing the crunch of brittle bone and the squelch of rotting flesh as my boot connects with the outstretched appendage. One of the moldering creatures manages to pull itself over the railing, toppling into the boat with a splash. It's a woman. Or was at one point. Clumps of long, braided hair dangle from the thing's skull like seaweed. A tangled necklace is entwined around its exposed vertebrae. Shreds of what appeared to be a McDonald's uniform cling to its torso, a name tag still pinned to the shirt. The realization of what I'm seeing washes over me. I never considered what happened to the millions of people who drowned in the city. The poor, the working class, the homeless. The ones who had been unable to escape the rapidly rising floodwaters, their waterlogged bodies bloating with gases and floating toward the surface, only to be forever trapped by the ceilings of whatever room in whatever building they were in when they died. I watch in numb horror as several once human forms pull themselves out of the water, flopping like fish over the railing and into the boat. Their skin hangs like rags from their algae-blackened bones, catching on the rivets lining the railing and sliding off into doughy piles that remind me of sodden toilet paper spat from an overflowing sewer. Their flesh teems with worms. Barnacles crust their skulls. The low-tide smell of rot and decomposition fills my mouth and nose. Once in the boat, the things slither hungrily on their bellies toward Alex's dying body, pulling themselves forward with their arms like infants who haven't yet learned to crawl. Their legs drag behind them, flaccid, seemingly useless. I backpedal away from the things in front of me. Something grabs my shoulder, and I feel the icy wetness of necrotic flesh graze my neck. With a wild yelp, I jerk away, then spin to find more skeletal hands curling over the railing behind me. In the reflection of the black glass skyscraper, I can see a dozen or more of the things climbing up the side of the boat. More are surfacing from the water in all directions. I'm surrounded. I look up at the building. The rope ladder Alex had descended only minutes earlier is still dangling from the broken 47th floor window. I climb onto one of the boat's wooden benches and reach for the ladder. My fingers graze the bottom rung. The ladder swings away from me. I reach for it again as it swings back in my direction, but I miss. The ladder seems to be getting shorter, further away. There's no way I can reach it from where I'm standing. I look down, remembering the rope Alex used to lash the boat to the building. Maybe I can leverage that to snag the ladder. I grab the rope, uncoil some slack, then turn back to the building. The ladder is gone. In the 47th floor window just overhead, Gary Benjamin peers down at me.
Gary!
I plead.
Help me!
Gary doesn't respond. Instead, he steps back into the shadows, drawing the remaining length of the ladder up through the window.
No! Gary, wait!
I shout.
The ladder! Please!
I reach desperately for the retracting ladder as it disappears into the darkness, but it's too far gone. I turn around, searching desperately for another way to escape. The creatures are swarming the boat from all directions. They have completely covered Alex's body and are feasting on his remains, greedily tearing the flesh from his limbs with their teeth. Some plunge their bony hands into his body cavity, pulling out dripping handfuls of viscera and shoveling it into their disjointed maws. Others are crawling toward me, their teeth gnashing, their arms reaching. There's nowhere for me to go. I only have one option. My hand settles on the butt of my gun. It's an unconscious movement driven by pure instinct. I'd forgotten that I even had the thing. I draw it from my belt, aim at the advancing horde, and fire. The bullets pass cleanly through flesh and bone, doing nothing to slow the creature's approach. The things are almost upon me. I feel their hands close around my ankles, around my calves. They begin to pull at me, drawing me downward. With a faraway stare, I press the barrel of the gun under my chin, then look up at the sky. My eyes fall on the penthouse. Its lights cast a soft white halo around the skyscraper's top floor. The lazy strains of the waltz have been replaced by something more up-tempo, a swing. The silhouettes behind the shades twirl and spin, joining and separating and joining again, oblivious to the horror unfolding below. I pull the trigger. The gunshot reverberates off the building's algae-slicked facades as my lifeless body tumbles forward into the waiting jaws of the undead horde. In the penthouse, the silhouettes never miss a beat. They keep dancing, as if all this is normal, as if it's just another day, as if nothing has happened at all.
Excerpt from UFOsabout.com, Paranormal Stories Archive, PhantasmsAndMonsters.com. Strange Tales from Vietnam and Indochina, Divine Intervention. Location, DMZ, Vietnam. Date, late 1966. Time, afternoon. At a landing zone called Oasis, the witness was working as a door gunner. On that date, he was pulling perimeter guard duty. As they came under attack, a C-130 gunship called Puff the Magic Dragon flew just outside their position and was working out their guns. It looked like fire coming from a hose in the dark. The next morning, the other gunners and the witness decided to rearrange outlinked ammo to have all the tracers together to give the same effect as the night before. That afternoon, they went out on a recon mission. As they approached the landing zone, they opened up with their machine guns. The LZ, landing zone, was large and mostly clear waist-high dried grass. As they landed, they received enemy fire. Small fires started all over from their tracer rounds. He heard on the intercom that a helicopter behind them was down with main rotor problems and fires had them enveloped. His captain ordered him to go back with a fire bottle and see if he could help. The witness grabbed the bottle but did not think to take his rifle. As he ran to their position, the crew chief waved him back. It seems like the rotor was fine and they were about to take off. As he ran back, he became disoriented and became lost. As he ran around looking, he heard someone shout, "Dung Li," which means stop or halt in Vietnamese. He looked around and saw a North Vietnamese soldier pointing his AK at him. Feeling helpless, since he was completely unarmed, he dropped to his knees, hands up. At the same time, the soldier spoke to him things he could not understand. As the soldier backed up, the witness knew he was going to die. From fear, he then felt overwhelming sadness. As his whole life passed in front of his eyes, he just hoped that it did not hurt so much. Suddenly, a total peace came over him, a feeling he could not describe. He then heard a loud crack. He jumped up thinking that he had been shot. He heard a thump and saw the enemy soldier fall to the ground. As he looked up, he saw the tallest person he had ever seen. He saw what appeared to be a GI about 7 or 8 feet tall. He just stood there motionless, perfect in dress, incredibly with no soil marks or sweat, a perfect-looking figure. His eyes shaded by the helmet showed through. An aura appeared to be all around him. He then spoke to the witness clearly. He told him that it was okay, that he was going to be safe. He added, "Thomas, go back to your bird." The witness realized that the stranger's lips never moved. Apparently, he had communicated with him telepathically. Thomas jumped up and ran to his bird, helicopter. As they lifted up, he looked down to see the dead enemy soldier, but no sign of the giant figure. He never mentioned what really happened to anyone for over 30 years. 10 years ago. The large, stocky, aging man, now with already white, close-cropped hair and a slight gait to his walk, and the young boy beside him enthusiastically milling around in the junk despite the cool fall weather, looked around at the Yellowwood City dump with a denial of disgust, where they also routinely disposed of his monthly recyclables. It was a time-consuming ritual, but a recently retired guy with time on his hands who didn't want to incinerate everything in a backyard barrel could still make a buck at the local salvage plant for his efforts, going through smelly bins full of beer cans and bottles or whatever else was saved from the waste stream. Additionally, it was a good way to spend some time and just have lunch with his seldom-seen grandkid Nathan, maybe teaching him some responsibility and getting him away from his man-hopping mom with her dead-end job in the process. Former Army Master Sergeant Silas Green, who had learned over the years to enjoy his bitterness and solitude, had just recently retired from the Indianapolis, Orleans, and Southern Railroad as a yard dispatcher and now had more than enough time to rummage through landfills. He hoped the hippies who used to spit on his men when they returned from the Nam were happy with his attempts at recycling efforts to save the planet, thank you very much. He remembered the dump when he was a kid. Heck, back then you could get rid of anything here, so citizens and corporations indeed unknowingly, or very knowingly, did. The rumors of sequestered toxic waste could not be too far off, given the smell and ripe orange-yellow ooze present through cracks in the soil. The Buchanan County commissioners in charge of operating the landfill were good anti-environmentalist Farm Bureau Republicans all. Of course, living in nice isolated developments on the other side of the county, they just outsourced the town of Yellowwood's waste hauling, and they didn't give a damn what happened here. The old vet wiped some snot on his flannel sleeve in the cool weather and rummaged through some dirty metal, maybe items worth something at the scrapyard. Remember, time is money. A man not given to too much sympathy, Silas looked at his grandchild Nathan while he smoked and vindictively thought, his worthless mom should be here in the dump too. The whore was out spending years of child support at the bar, while Nathan's dad Jiry was out keeping us free from Saddam Hussein, a.k.a. so damn insane, and the rest of the oil-misering ragheads during the Gulf War before he got killed. Now she's getting Jiry's Social Security, his military pension, and raising a Kane for her kid. Guess just time will tell how he turns out. The tow-headed kid suddenly tugged at the old man's sleeve, oblivious to the place's sights and smells of decay, and ripping the sergeant from his redundant, mournful thoughts. Nathan suddenly pointed at a random spot and cried out, "Grandpa, look at there. I think it's cats. Why do they live here in the dump?" Silas suddenly focused on a pile of debris where 3 little kittens were hiding, crying out for food and companionship. 3 cautiously padded out to petition Silas for their existence, unusually large for their age, rambunctious and furry, somewhat oblivious to their filthy home. The rotund female playfully rolled on the ground, perhaps hoping for a treat. One was still hiding in the rotten box, her meow a perverted cry. Finally, it shuffled out, almost slithered out, the runt of the litter. It had a slightly larger head, which made sense, given that the mutant abomination had 3 eyes set over 2 mouths. One orifice was normal in appearance, but somewhat offset in the jaw, the other small and off to the side on the face. Its ears were set back on its head somewhat more than usual. She stumbled a bit as her limbs were misaligned and a little bent sideways, all but unable to catch much to keep her alive. Despite its malformations, the kitten had bright, keen golden eyes, all 3 of them, with a beautiful and unique calico coat blended with tiger features and a long, fluffy tail. She looked up with a pitiful gaze, but also with one as with a purpose, as if to defiantly say she could catch a prey no one else could. The thing was just like its litter mates, simply wanting a chance to escape this dump. Silas looked at it and swore it had 6 claws on its right paw, not 5. Holy smokes, if the stuff in the landfill caused this, what the hell's getting into the town's drinking water now? Stories of a few neighbors around here going mad, giving birth to stillborn children, or just mentally shutting down with paranoid hallucinations over the past few years may have some justification. More like LSD than PCBs. Most children tend to have either an imaginative and protective fascination or abhorrence with the abnormal. More comfortable with the latter, Nathan said, "It's really gross looking. Shouldn't we kill it and put it out of its misery?" The mutant cat peered up at them and tried to mouth something with its smaller orifice to plead its case, somehow realizing that these only large-smelling beings could save it. It extended its right paw as if to exclaim it simply wanted to be part of a normal family. Or a normal animal. At that, Silas stopped to remember his comrades back in the Nam, some who had been hideously disfigured by shrapnel, burning phosphorus grenade blasts, or communist Viet Cong torture. Many were still shunned by society as forgotten freaks in some VA hospital, not as heroes defending American freedom. He felt almost as if he understood this being's sorry condition, just trying to exist, maybe just needing some help or empathy. Not a man given to faith, Silas said sternly with his southern Indiana drawl. God don't make mistakes. He's got a purpose for everything. Maybe that thing deserves to live too. I'll keep them all. We don't leave no one behind. Keep them in the toolbox in the truck bed for now until we get back to the house. Just put your gloves on and be careful so they don't scratch you. We'll give them all a flea bath and food. Maybe they'll be all right. We'll put them to work too. Lots of mice around the barn anyway. He was sure there was some kind of toxic waste or chemical perversity that made the small cat the way it was, but the other had their own oddities. One had huge fangs and another had oversized paws. The other was just fat. Their parents had obviously abandoned them and were long gone, maybe dead or perhaps mutated themselves. He wasn't sure if he could take them to a veterinarian and explain the situation yet. He later indeed make one initial trip to a rather surprised vet and quietly got them all fixed and provided shots. And that was the last anyone in town saw of the creatures. No one bothered to keep their records. The little cats became to know Silas as the bowl filler, which had given him some small recognition as time and life's purposes continued to pass him by. Sadly, as much as he cared for them, the cats all sickened and passed away over the next year, probably victims of their toxic origin. Silas stoically buried them behind what was left of the aging barn, with what would be described as full military honors for the animals. He had taken good time to play with them and had fed them well, with fresh milk and leftovers from a local butcher, but still they couldn't survive. Even as this round of death solidified Silas's hatred for life, he did remember some joy from the vagabond animals whenever he fed them. "Come and get it. Meat. And I mean meat." He missed the most mutated one most of all, often helping her to not getting muscled out of her share of food and building her a special litter box ramp because she had trouble getting into it. They all had very distinct personalities, and now they were gone. After again seeing so much pointless death, he wondered why they were taken. Just born at the wrong time, at the wrong place? But then again, he knew it simply was. A couple of years after they were long buried and decomposed, he dug up their bones and precisely placed their respective remains in good tight wood boxes and kept in the dry part of the basement each deceased pet's coffin marked with its own name. He wasn't even sure why he had interred them there. Sometimes he would still speak to them while in the basement as he did laundry, imaging them playing, rolling and purring, growing larger. For some itching reason in his slowly but increasingly unstable mind, Silas had to believe that surely, someday, they would come out and play again. Maybe it was just another recurring long-ago acid echo thought about the big little ones. Whatever they were supposed to be, he couldn't remember. He had just chalked all of that up to the Nam and bad medication. Now, the old two-story farmhouse, with its weathered details, surrounded by gnarled, aging oak trees, sat imposingly above the surrounding rolling cornfields well past the edge of town, largely unnoticed near the dead end of Thornhill Road. The dilapidated place was permeated with mildew and dank smells. It could have really used some new paint or siding. Another layer of shingles on the sagging roof wouldn't hurt either. Green, now in his early 70s, would never see that happen. Now he was thankful for his railroad pension after 29 grindingly boring post-war years as a dusty rail switchyard dispatcher and loading coordinator. However, at pension time, it had paid to be a longtime member of the Brotherhood of Short-Line Switchmen's Union, working the line from Yellowwood to the switchyard at the quarry pits for Dark Hollow limestone and aggregates in Lawrence County, almost an hour's drive away each way every day on the twisty US 50 through the Hoosier National Forest. The Bedford-based company was one of the oldest mining extraction operations in Indiana, and probably still only one of a few in America capable of shipping product orders large enough to justify the cost of using rail transport, like back in the day when journeyman cutters hewed and shaped raw material for the Empire State Building. It'd have been good to see American resources still being used in America, he thought. Silas's retirement fund could keep him afloat for a few more years with the old farmhouse paid for and settled after his divorce from Sheila 2 decades ago, not too long after he bought the place after being back stateside, and he could continue to cash farm most of his 40 rolling acres behind the house and adjacent small woods. But since Social Security may not last now, he thought it better just to try and keep things fixed up on the inside of the spacious, musty, remote house he had lived in for decades while he could. Besides, the prospect of ending up wasting away in a negligent VA hospital, or the last stop, the veterans' home up in West Lafayette, gave him good incentive for his tall, bulky, and imposing old frame to try and stay productive and in shape despite his arthritis. His trips to the local VFW for drinking, storytelling, and moral support were becoming more infrequent, the calls for human connection from other people in general, and other vets in particular, becoming more ephemeral. Today, a bright and balmy early autumn Saturday, Silas made some coffee from one of his many antiquated, American-made appliances. He had slammed some shots of cheap whiskey the evening before, though it didn't mix with his medication well. He felt it now, getting up uncharacteristically late around noon, pondering what was left of his afternoon. He was too disengaged and unsteady to ride his old Harley into town for some groceries and beer now. A shame, as lately he had been receiving several disturbing calls from an anonymous person about his grandson Nathan. Not white from the sound of the guy either. Pausing to think, in Silas's opinion, his young grandson was turning out to be a 22-year-old zero, big on talk, but short on action and understanding authority. His kind didn't last long back in the Delta, that's for sure. The now directionless, sullen kid managed to hold a second shift job at Southern Quality Gear and Axles, where the non-union shop along Huron Road on the south side of hilly Yellowwood made torque hubs, axles, spindles, and other parts for multinational large machinery corporations. The gear used to be a damn good paying job back in Silas's generation, where any work was scarce in this backwater part of Indiana. Still, while the Great Recession had screwed the working man's wages, healthcare benefits, and savings potential, it seemed many under 30s now were okay with that, as long as they could live off someone else. Along those lines, Nathan had been staying at the farmhouse when it suited him since he had become an adult and got sick of his mom's rules, giving Silas both some grief and rent. The old man knew his grandkid, his only living relative, had racked up numerous run-ins with the local cops during the past several years for petty crimes, but somehow had always managed to avoid any real jail time. He had learned nothing, despite Silas always bailing him out. However, now it seemed that lately his friends were looking for him with unusual urgency. The repetitive phone messages were simple and profane. "Hey, where's the money? Where's the shit? Where'd these jokers even get this number?" While the intrusive calls were disconcerting, Silas was nonetheless able to take care of himself and was well armed. After all, having served in the military, enlisting and surviving 3 tours in Nam, one during the 68 Tet Offensive no less, well, whatever these punks threatened to do seemed like idle chat next to that. Green drank his coffee slowly and paused again to remember his last mission in '69, the ambush at Trembling, which ended up with many American servicemen dead, wounded, or left behind screaming and helpless, waiting to be retrieved, while the retributional carnage committed by the North Vietnamese to their own kinsmen in the village after that engagement ending up being much worse for the locals. Green had already been on the end of his third tour, a smart and insightful young man who had no college deferment to keep him from the draft. He had simply accepted this repeating role as what life had dealt him. At least he must have some value in life to be able to keep coming back and kicking ass, right? Now, as he thought reflectively, the carefully inlaid ceramic coffee mug he drank from suddenly jittered on the table as the loud shockwave of approaching F4s crept into his mind. The mug transformed into a military-issue metal drinking cup as he drank, with sounds of machine guns, smells of smoky cordite, and the oily napalm in the background, as his mind again involuntarily ventured back into the past. The battle was not glorious enough to be remembered as an ambush. It was stupid luck for the GIs, bad luck. Really bad luck. A faint, distant, echoing voiceover shouted, "Incoming!" Another hot, bucking, humid day in the late summer of 1969. Intel was wrong. Again. Recently promoted to E8 Master Sergeant, out of sheer attrition, he suspected, Silas Green saw a little reward for his new rank as he humped his sweaty pack, his profanities keeping cadence with his steps up the hills and through the humid bush. As Alpha Company approached the Trembling River and its little village across the bank with the same name, or close enough for the Americans, there were indeed no unguarded stockpiles of munitions in the supposedly friendly village to confiscate as planned. Just half of a Viet Cong battalion hanging around that had somehow gone unnoticed on radar and at HQ. After advancing downhill through impermeable brush and an initial hour of surprised firefight, Captain McGinnis initiated a retreat, but couldn't contact reinforcements because a gook was able to sneak up and take his face off with a grenade while the commander had gone down to the riverbank to get a clear radio signal. One forward observer, Flavin, a tall soldier with intense eyes covered by dusty spectacles, along with his squad, were ultimately able to get away uphill in the humid jungle and tried to clear a landing zone for a belated Huey exit to take whoever could make it to the top of the ridge, whenever that could happen. However, the rest of the men down there by the river defending their position were sitting ducks, and the only way out was up the exposed stone hill by the river or through nearby bottomland jungle, where the dinks were commencing a pincer movement between the village river crossing and the uplands. 2 days of hidden firefights, writhing or passed out guys bleeding, while they all waited for HQ to figure coordinates, then figure a clear place for an LZ. An all-out airstrike could have been called in and would have effectively neutralized the enemy there sure enough, but the small target area would have also surely killed the trapped US men and wiped out the innocent village. Too risky, the leaders behind the lines thought, as a now war-divided America was watching and scrutinizing every move of this gruesome chess match on network television nightly, the first video broadcast conflict in America. Death with dinner, then commercials for housewives on the importance of how to keep your gravy from getting too lumpy. Back in the bush, Green's own pinned-down forces and the rest of Alpha Company was slowly being picked off, their bodies wilting and waiting for medevac choppers and reinforcements in the confusing bush, while the North Vietnamese's MiG-17s prowled overhead in the always steamy and rain-filled clouds, lurking to strafe them. As obscene as it was, not many of the wounded could be retrieved on the steep rocky slopes in the small belated window of opportunity for rescue. Some of the remaining Americans left behind and under fire on the rocky hill outcroppings and river silt had to live off of their own, or the nearby dead, bodily fluids to survive another 2 or 3 days until they were later rescued, or were simply picked up later as bodies to be retrieved. After some 98-degree days, the rotting corpses cooking on the angled stone outcropping emanated a putrid odor so strong that made men on both sides retch whenever the breeze shifted. sometimes fatally giving away their positions. During the engagement, the worst, Green suspected, had happened to his young friend, a corporal named Lenny Walentowicz. The large Polish 21-year-old had been a great football defensive end back in some Pennsylvania high school and understood team playing. Even in this chaotic environment, Master Sergeant Green had tried to mentor him with his even-handed and ugly experiences from prior tours on how to lead enlisted men. Walentowicz, now fueled on battle joy, adrenaline, and LSD, was valiantly fending off enemy fighters approaching the stone slope when he was shot directly in his bandolier, in which he had stocked with several phosphorus grenades. The subsequent explosion incinerated the young man, and the nearby Green got a hot piece of something on his forearm. Not metal, but melting, burning human flesh. What was left of Walentowicz mercifully died a quick death. No burn unit in that part of the world, perhaps not anywhere even in America at the time, could have saved him. Even so, the phosphorus embedded within his body would have ignited once exposed to oxygen, even if he had made it to the operating table. As the enemy drew closer and no way out for Green and the remaining men seemed inevitable, a mortar shell fell nearby, the concussion knocking Silas somewhat unconscious as the firefight drew nearer. A recent anti-war song bizarrely began to ring in his head. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why, whoopee, we're all gonna die. Perhaps so. In his dream state, he suddenly saw a strange Asian specter drawing close and looming over his incapacitated body, oblivious to and unaffected by the carnage happening about him. He came out of nowhere, not dressed in military garb or even armed, rather just a ragged old villager man with a broad conical hat. By his side was a small mangy house cat, Siamese by the look of it. Both characters seemed surrealistically out of place here, especially given the man's, confidence. The little cat was not rattled by the loudness of the war and carnage either. What? Are you here to kill me or save me? He heard himself laugh. As if to answer, the wrinkled, stunted, bent-over man suddenly evolved into a 9-foot, brilliantly adorned being, his muscular shoulders 4 feet wide, like a giant Genghis Khan with a Fu Manchu mustache and long shiny dark hair, but still sporting his hat. The cat meowed softly at first, then its sound grew louder and deeper as it enlarged into a beautifully huge, seething beast. It still resembled the house cat, though now the size of a lion. It looked closely and inquisitively at Silas, as if to devour him, then the cat stepped back and nodded, bellowing a roar of agreement with some eternal purpose gestured by the angel villager. Somehow none of the approaching soldiers were even aware of these very strange interlopers. Random bullets ricocheted off of the large man harmlessly, as if they were made of papier-mâché balls thrown by second graders. Amazingly, the monstrous Siamese cat did the speaking, saying something like, not let die now, to the towering man, who then nodded and turned around for a moment, gesturing at the encroaching North Vietnamese with his enormous hand. The otherwise affable-looking supernatural being lost his smile for a moment and gave a look to the encroaching enemy like something Silas would never want to confront anywhere. He uttered one word, or rather, a loud commanding sound like a chorus of bears, and the ground suddenly reverberated throughout the valley. Then, a cloud of translucent fog issued forth from his right palm, and it somehow wafted through the humid air directly toward the NVA men, enveloping them with a swarm of something like flying worm-sized snakes with sharp-like teeth. Whatever unearthly creatures the huge being cursed them with, screaming voices ensued in the jungle as the hardened enemy hysterically and instantly retreated away toward the river, bodies dropping as flesh was devoured right through their uniforms. Laying on his back and obvious to the surrounding carnage, Silas asked, "What's your names?" The shining titan, who simply restored his smile and shrugged, divulged nothing. The cat impatiently continued to speak in English with a broken Asian accent. "You not able to pronounce names. Call him intervention, me harbinger. We here so you and others live now. We show local witches who in charge of Valley 2. They cast spells so you all die. Intervention say they wake up dead tomorrow, but you not. But you listen up. Someday, Holy One, maybe send help at the end of your days. You care for big little ones when no one else care. So you given power to call on them, or what look like them. Maybe it make up for what you people do to pollute world, make mutants and deformities of creation, eh? Maybe they all come back for judgment on those who harm you at earthly reckoning. The supernatural feline reiterated its frustration. Others, all over Earth dying, cry out for help, but we here to help you instead. Master have big plans for you, but you no follow. The cat thing bristled then, squinted and pointed a paw at Silas. You made to help people too, Silas Green. Could, if you try. Warning we also share. If you not get over hate and not love others, you life be cut short too, soldier. You may not remember the day, but you last decision be only that really counts. Last day come upon you like all men, come like lightning. Be ready. Holy One and us count still on you then. I not have faith in you like intervention. He think you change. Intervention gently nodded and reached down to pet the huge feline as if to calm it down. It actually started to purr. Remember, we count on you. We waiting. Delivered from what? Was I supposed to die here? Who are the big little ones? Then, with some far-off trumpet sound and unearthly song, the supernatural beings suddenly looked up and respectfully stood still, then faded away and disappeared in front of Silas, his reality replaced instantly back with only the sights and smells of war as his bizarre encounter rang in his ears. Green was still lying on his back, dazed as the jungle foliage swayed over him and the random shots continued in the distance. He noticed his small but numerous shrapnel wounds were suddenly all healed and gone, something else he would forget over the years. A giant cat who could speak? A man single-handedly repelling the NVA with flying worms? The already exhausted Green passed out. As the sun set beautifully in the hazy river valley, several U.S. soldiers miraculously made it through the tall, humid brush, where Green and a few other live bodies were still laying, moaning. The choppers had at last landed at the top of the hill clearing to the coordinates that Flavin had prescribed, even as gunfire still bristled. A private and his colleague broke through the bush, then slapped and probed the prostrate and dirty Green, seeing his dog tags. "Come on, Sarge, wake up. This is the last train out of Dodge and we're getting on it. Going home, man." They struggled to carry his large, limp body over the slimy forest bottom growth and out of the last of the battle as he mumbled about spiritual redemption, flying shark worms, and huge talking cats. Man, did this guy get his bell rung or what? A cynical medic later laughed as the chopper was loaded and quickly powered up. As the motors became louder and the terrain became thankfully more distant, a young black, banged-up private from the group who had searched the force for survivors was more introspective and noticed, "Lucky SOB. Look, ain't no scratches on him, and yet ain't almost no one else made it out of that part of the bush to the LZ alive. Captain said we had time for one more trip looking for survivors, and somehow we stumbled across this dude, just laying there like he passed out sunbathing. It's like the gooks must have just taken off or something. Yeah." He chanted some butt-kicking jive specific to his regiment so they could take credit. A third young man, his intense facial features coupled with a strong southern accent, chimed in somberly to correct the situation over the rotor noise. "Not all of them. Guys from our squad saw some skeletons downstream with ripped-up North Vietnamese uniforms. Oppenheimer saw them running away when he headed up to the LZ. Said they was screaming and something right out of the air was eating their flesh right to the bone. And it weren't like napalm, man. I think we gotta be glad we're getting out of here now. Man, What'll the CIA think of next? Back to the field hospital, sedatives and painkillers applied. Green's tour of duty was ironically to be over in 6 weeks anyway, so he was transferred after the short hospital stay to spend the rest of it doing desk work in Da Nang. He somehow never saw the cursed jungle again, except in his dreams, a jungle that kept growing in his mind, it seemed. Silas awoke from his daydream now, always the same, vaguely grasping at memories. Just a concussion hallucination, right? It's time you need to quit thinking about Chuprong. The conflict remained now in his head. No, those soldiers were left behind on your watch, and you let them stay in the meat grinder, Sergeant. What makes up for that? Stop it. Wasn't my fault. If we had won, holding that hill and taking a village that close to the border could have turned something our way for the war, man. In the end, almost 80% of Alpha Company was officially dead or MIA trying to take the little village of Chuprong and its supposed repository of arms and food. Many of the rotting American bodies never would or could be recovered. And of course, during 1969, official information from the military didn't necessarily mean conveying all of Vietnam's political or physical carnage of the day to the American media or families. So even today, Silas did not want to talk about those events. As time passed, he indeed forgot about, or blocked out, the encounter with the bizarre supernatural beings who saved his life. No one would have believed him anyway, right? Back at the Saturday in his house, the old landline rang again. Silas hesitantly picked it up, his wrist starting to throb again with arthritis. Yo, is Nathan there? No, who the hell is this? None of your fucking business, old man. We want our money. He's out there cooking our stuff, we know. He owes us a lot of shit, and we're coming over to collect. Y'all be wise to leave now, cause we ain't going away till he pays up. Got it? No, friend, you don't get it. Nathan is out of town. Maybe you should be too, ghetto jackass. Now leave me alone. Some cursing and threats on the other end of the line, then the old man hung up. Silas grabbed the stairway railing and slowly went upstairs to check his arsenal. Loaded Colt .45 caliber, AR-15, Ithaca Automag 10-gauge shotgun, his favorite. Yeah, that should be a deterrent. He kept them locked up from Nathan so he wouldn't steal and sell them, but maybe it was time to take one of them out of the vault and keep downstairs now, just in case. Nonetheless, around dusk, the Chrysler 300M with its gaudy paint scheme and 20-inch chrome rims pulled up to Silas's long winding driveway and parked just off the road. The obscenity-laced rap music booming out of it had been silenced a few hundred yards ago. Its occupants were the stuff of 20-something losers. The car's driver was local creep Derek 12-pack Haymaker, who had a rap sheet since 6th grade, which included battery, theft, and dealing controlled substances. He had been a friend of Nathan's since high school, when the two decided getting ahead in life was a better living, making and selling dope. Neither lazy at their passion, Nathan and Derek had learned together how to cook some of the best crystal in southern Indiana, inspired by Breaking Bad perhaps. Either way, Derek felt betrayed over prospects of promising a large sale of product last week in town that he was sure, in his drug-induced paranoia, that Nathan, Iceman Green, was cooking instead in his grandfather's basement out in the boonies and sitting on it. On top of this problem, there was also a matter of a pound of gleaming white stash gone from the rear room of his trailer. Who else could have known where it was and gotten to it, right? Meanwhile, scrawny Thomas Tway Renfro and his big-boned, scantily clad girlfriend, Natisha Johnson, who had both moved from a closed-down Gary apartment complex with their little boy to keep receiving HUD benefits, were along for the ride. As the Windy City area had closed its public housing compounds, a diaspora of welfare recipients had relocated all over small-town Indiana with their hands, or their middle fingers, held out. Now all too acquainted with the Midwest small-town drug scene, the couple needed a meth fix soon, and were now both fidgeting in the back seat, Tway jiggling his scrawny leg in impatience. Natisha flicked her smoke out the car window. She preferred letting the guys do the brawling if the opponents were big enough, but despite her short stature, she could throw down some punches as good as the boys when it came down to it, and most men didn't want to hit a girl, much less one who had once thrown her cousin across the room in one fell swoop. Zach Kringle, the youngest at 20 and Derek's pet as a result, rode shotgun in the hopped-up Chrysler and stroked his spindly beard, wondering why Haymaker hadn't brought more than one pistol for this job. But then he probably figured the old man wouldn't be hard to be made to talk. Still, never hurts to bring an extra piece for a job. Zach, who had the weekend off from his construction job, was originally a practical kid who had succumbed to the meth party allure and all of a sudden had financial obligations of his own to certain persons back at his now mostly Hispanic mobile home park. On top of that, his frisky 14-year-old girlfriend Chloe had said something last week about missing her period after enjoying another encounter in his car's back seat last month. The age difference between them, at least as far as Indiana's consent law was concerned, was considered a felony, and all he could think of right now was, "This trip had better pay off, homies, 'cause I gotta go." Besides, while he and Haymaker were cool, there would be no love lost getting away from the meth cook's control freak attitude. Yeah, taking Nathan's crystal and getting out of town sounded good right now. He tucked his knife into his boot as his head bobbed rhythmically in anticipation of violence. The consensus among them was, that bastard Nathan would be coming off of some ice now. Oh yes. As individuals, they had all done some daytime breaking and entering, but this was their first job together. Derek wasted no time being in charge as the one with his superior brains, height, and muscles the others lacked. Besides, his issue with Nathan had become personal. He couldn't be seen as outmaneuvered or outsmarted, which he clearly had been here. He stroked his almost shaven head and announced, "Okay, I know the Iceman's cooking in the basement. He gotta be. Ain't nobody else gonna be around, so we knock out the old man and get our stash." "You know," Zach interjected, "maybe we don't just kill Nathan when we see him. I'm thinking of something more interesting. Taking him out for a little trip in the country. Say, 20 miles into Hoosier National Forest. Lots of places there to put some pain out of that piece of shit without anyone hearing the screams." The group laughed with the hackles of stoners, the idea replete with possibilities. Derek focused. "Okay, let's go. Leave your phones in the car. I don't want no stupid stuff going off to give us away, okay? Zach, the sledgehammer's in the trunk, man. You break the door down." Okay, but why do you want me to do it, man?" "'Cause I'm busy carrying the gun, man." Zach was a little thick and needed the obvious stated often and occasionally with some steel mixed in the words. The creeps got out of the car, careful not to slam the doors, with Natisha standing beside it to stand guard. She'd come in later if they found any crystal for sure. The guys quietly approached the house, its dingy windows reflecting the day's waning light. A breeze rustled over the tall midsummer corn covering the rolling country landscape. No traffic on this old neglected gravel road. No one around within earshot. Perfect. Zach wasted no time with knocking. The sledge broke the aging front door off its rusty hinges in seconds. The gang burst in, catching Silas totally off guard in his grimy easy chair. Haymaker ground his spent cigarette on Silas's carpet and drawled loudly, "Hey, old boy, where's Nathan? We wasn't kidding. Told you he'd come here 'cause he owes us. I know he's cooking meth in your basement. Might as well help us out and we'll be gone, aight?" "What part of fuck off don't you understand, punk? I haven't seen Nathan in days. This is my house. Now get out." "No, it ain't gonna go down like that, Grandpa. We're taking what's ours. Get him." Zach and Tway suddenly brandished their baseball bats, which they used on Silas before he could even stand up. They beat him over the course of the next minute, breaking many of the bones in his aging body and left him on the floor gasping. This was a little more drama than Haymaker had intended to inflict. Maybe we shouldn't have smoked that last bowl. Oh well. You want to tell us where he is now? I guess I'll just run downstairs and get to shit myself. Wouldn't go down there if I were you, young man. Silas slurred and groaned, suddenly seeing a vision of things growing, moving, changing downstairs. What, the lab gonna blow up or something? I'm fucking going down there. How are you gonna stop me, old man? Who's gonna help you now? At that time, there was a faint but distinguishable thud in the basement, then several others, deep and resonant. The buzzed intruders did not attenuate themselves to it, but suddenly, Silas recalled a long-ago promise and saw his endgame coming into play, as there would be no way out of this situation and the gang would wait to finish him off. The big little ones. They're coming. I know it. I feel them. Hungry for meat. Your meat. Derek laughed mockingly and opened the large old oak door. The stairway into the house's basement was musty and creaky, and there was a funny odor rising up as well. Since Derek's sense of smell was trashed from using meth, he didn't bother to realize this, and he was too hopped up to be intimidated. He smiled back at his posse, brandishing his .32 caliber pistol and disappearing into the darkness. Only one light bulb in the ceiling illuminated the dank, cavernous basement. You'll be back with the goods, then we go into town and party. If the Iceman's hiding down there, he's done too. Haymaker excitedly said as he descended the ancient stairs. Yoo-hoo, Nathan. Just stop by and say hi, man. He sang off-key. As Derek tried to acclimate to the lack of light downstairs, he realized there was no meth lab, nor trace of any precursors of drug production. Nathan may have been cooking here, but no one would have ever known it. He had been had. Small trickles of light came in through the dingy window wells where the side rooms contained the ancient and huge converted coal furnace, the water heater, washer and dryer room, and a rotting brick arch wall separating a space with some rotting old furniture. Wall moisture wicked and collected onto the part of the floor that was cracking concrete, then into some half-plugged floor drain. 4 little very old wood boxes lay in line on a table in the corner, all broken open. They all had names scrawled on them, indistinguishable now. What a creepy shithole, he thought as he coughed in the mold-filled air. These ain't right. A moment later, the sounds started quickly. First a small grunt, then growling that became very loud, joined by horrific hissings amidst the dark. We back? Where we been? Miss Basement is our basement. What live meat doing here? This one not smell like bowl filler. Smell like fear and hate and wrong things. We go share meat now. Save some for Gracie. She hiding in corner like always. I smell more meat up where Master stays. Rusty, we get our fill. He be proud we kill meat for him. You only think of food, Big Jack. We need to see Master. If he okay, then maybe play. We big enough to play with anyone now. Shut up, Pixie. You always try to be nice, steal attention. This meat not nice. The mewling and growling speech between the creatures was lost on Derek, who shot off around reflexively, not hitting the things in the shadows, the small bullet sticking in the dirt part of the floor. He didn't notice the monstrous forms circling behind him until they attacked. In the living room, sounds emanated through the vents from something being tossed around, ripped apart, then a scream. Natisha, who had previously been standing guard for any cars driving by the house, was now killing time in the foyer when she heard the shrieking sounds. She strode over to yell down into the basement where the sounds had come from. Hey, Dick, you alright, man? Silence answered her. What's down there, you old bastard? Shortly, what was left of Derek hobbled up to the basement doorway in shock and minus most of his left calf, his foot dangling by sinew. Now, Tway, Zach, and Natisha went from badass bangers to horrified overgrown children in seconds. Haymaker could only gurgle, They're big. It fucking hurts. Help. He tried to crawl like a bloody rag and shut the basement door, but was pulled back down the stairs by something, his screams accompanied by breaking bones and subsonic growls. Silas continued to laugh, no mirth to his voice at all. His ribs were too damaged for a good guffaw, but he managed. As the noises from the basement grew louder, it came back to him, a faint message through the years rekindled. Chew prong, a warning, and something about big little ones. Impossible, as he had buried them all. Yet, he still realized they were here now, and somehow as pissed off at these kids as he was. I told you, you had a choice to stay away. Could have just left us alone. Then you had your chance to leave and piss that away. Shouldn't have been here to begin with. Just like the Nam. Too late now. This is their place now. Oh yes. They've been waiting. Yeah, now they come. Watch this. Silas turned his bloodied head toward the basement and called out with what effort he had left. Meat! And I mean meat! Come and get it! The sounds from the basement were coming closer and quickly now, the steps creaking under an incredible weight. The growling continued, then the mutant beasts emerged quickly, almost smashing the door off its hinges in the process. One had Derek's dripping flesh in its mouth like a prize bird or intrusive rodent to present to its master. They had wasted no time making what was left of the self-indulgent meth head pay for being an idiot and a thief, and now his remaining flesh was instantly torn up right before the rest of the gang's unbelieving eyes. The monsters appeared in form as simple house cats, only each of these animals were inexplicably over 300 pounds, the largest being around 400 pounds of girth. Somehow, a resurrection of Silas's beloved pets, all the companionship left for him in his mind over the years, now back with vengeance on their enhanced cat minds. Rusty, Big Jack, and Pixie Cat. Oh yes, and poor Gracie, wherever she was. Silas kept laughing and gestured to the intruders even as he started to spit up blood. Meaty meat. Go get it. The old familiar call for fresh food resonated happily in the cats' ears as they wasted no time taking turns pouncing on the intruders. Big Jack, a shy, waddling tabby who had trouble fitting through the basement doorway, deferentially followed Rusty, an assertive striped tiger mix with an unnaturally reddish fur whose strong tail wagged with a life of its own. If there was an issue among the cats, such as food, he was the one who would settle it. Rusty's skull had mutated into something with fangs like a saber-toothed tiger, now like a pair of kitchen knives being welded into his skull to fit his primal attitude. If Zach had simply stayed still, he may have survived and gotten away, but in his childish bravado, he swung his knife around to shank them and swaggered toward the cats. Come on, bitches, I feed you my pit bull. His aggressive gestures sent the males into a frenzy, hissing and ears set back. One blindsided him, then both easily knocked him to the floor with feline quickness. Before he realized it, he discovered that not only was his blade missing, but also most of his right arm. He shrieked as he gazed upon the bloody muscle strands left dangling. Then they came for the new toy again, claws batting and throwing the meat around like a cornered mouse, until lumbering Big Jack, the largest and always the hungriest, could no longer resist the calls of his stomach. He meowed a suggestion to Rusty, and they both lunged to take turns stripping Zach to the bone as he screamed and watched himself die. His eyes, the only flesh left in his head. Tway fared no better, as a monstrous calico with perfectly modeled colors was now crouching in front of him, docile for one moment, cocking her head and extending her arm gently, as if asking for attention with a questioning, bellowing meow. Pixie was beautiful, except that her paws were hugely enlarged, even for her size, mutated like large frying pans for feet with 6-inch claws. With this large of a prey, she couldn't decide if she wanted to eat or play with it, darn it. She was the more docile one of the group, but not seeing a response, now an instinctive growl and wiggle in her hindquarters went through Pixie as she now dove to use her scoop-shoveled-sized paws to tear out his belly. Tway screamed as he could see his own steaming guts being devoured right out of him. Natisha heard the screams of her friends as she cowered near the door. The cats all now closed in on her. If she moved, the monster felines would get her. If she didn't, they'd still probably get her. There was no way out, and this old guy knew it. Nice kitties. The girl, who expected to receive a drug bonus here after this break-in, carefully rose off of the floor, walking slowly toward the door. She didn't notice the smell of her own urine or its feel on her wet jeans. Just as Natisha went to swing the front door open, Pixie Cat made her move again, sinking her oversized claws into the human's back, easily stripping Natisha's flesh as she was thrust backward with a grunt. The two other cats joined in, tearing up or devouring most of the young woman's body in minutes. Rusty protectively carried a chunk of the girl's torso with his huge teeth to the living room corner for future dining. Silas lay on the floor and checked the blood pouring out of him, unable to do anything but witness the human carnage with both revulsion and satisfaction. They look just like pulled pork. The three creatures then nonchalantly passed what was left of the girl's steaming carcass and stopped to examine Silas laying on the floor. Pixie gave a forlorn meow at the sight of the bowl filler, knowing he was bloody and dying. He reached to caress the giant pets one last time, only to withdraw his arm in pain. Big Jack gave him a slobbery but gentle lick on his forehead. Silas was afraid he may wish to flop down and cuddle. Go outside. Outside. Best for you to go now. Where's Gracie? Didn't she make it here? Rusty swatted his large paw as if to say he didn't care. She was still somewhere in the basement. She got all the attention, even now. The cats still knew outside was a command not to be questioned, and they obediently pushed through the open front door unabated, warily looking around and taking in the sense of the outdoors they hadn't seen in years. Scary, beautiful freedom at last. They stopped to look back at Silas as if to pay respects, somehow knowing their surreal task was completed. Upon the porch, Big Jack and Pixie Cat busily sniffed each other's anuses, then chirped something to each other as if to say goodbye before wandering off in different directions. Rusty stopped briefly beyond the front door to bathe his multicolored coat, as if indignant about the mess he had made. He shook off the matter on his coat, its swirls of caramel white and brown soiled by the blood of his feast. Huge, cunning, and intelligent, he then strode off with direction and purpose. More meat. At his size, species wouldn't much matter. Dumb human meat god in way of bowl filler not be nice. Showed them have full belly. Bowl filler been good, but smell like he dying. I live, get out, be smart, survive. The usually prim and proper Pixie promptly stopped to stretch and relieve herself in the yard. With abandon, she suddenly meowed, flopped and rolled around elsewhere, preening herself from the human groove she had just indulged in, rolling on and enjoying the new sensation of warm grass for a moment before disappearing across the road to somewhere. Her oversized paws made her gallop and lope a bit. Sure, someone take me in, feed me like bowl filler. I be good. Me love meat if they nice, not smell to them like Rusty hate or Jack lazy. Still, my brothers. Sorry for little Gracie. She not walk right. May not get out. Us all different now somehow. Just want find home with food and warm sun patch to sleep on. Big Jack wandered up to Silas's aging Harley Road King, still parked on the concrete stepping stones by the gravel driveway, then territorially rubbed his huge girth up against it, which sent the heavy touring bike over its kickstand and tumbling onto its side, loudly crushing its windshield, chrome crash bar, and the right side floorboard. He hissed and clawed at it and then, embarrassed, lumbered off around the rear of the house and disappeared away under the humid fading daylight into Silas's pastoral cornfields and rolling woods. Time for a nap. Sorry we not all together. Many meat show up and fight bowl filler. Make good dinner. I go on, find more bowl fillers. Be good to them. We'll miss Pixie and Gracie, but need food. Free now. Rusty not boss of me. They do what they want. More meat for me now I get out. Meanwhile, Silas continued to laugh as he crawled to the kitchen and stretched to get his final hit of painkillers out of the medication drawer in the kitchen. The bleed out from his blows would be slow but complete soon enough. This he accepted. Maybe if he could get to his cordless phone on the counter. Meat. Meat for you everywhere. Go, my friends. They were actually real again, and now were free, and perhaps finally so was he. Silas didn't hear Nathan's old truck pull into the driveway just then. The lanky, tattooed young man barged through the door with a small .32 caliber pistol drawn, and upon viewing the carnage exclaimed, "What the fuck happened? Hey, where's Haymaker? That's his car out there. Are you okay, Grandpa?" "No, I'm not okay. You need to call 911 now. I've fallen and I can't get up, as they say. Your friends, those jives and a couple of skinhead losers, came here looking for you." He hacked some blood onto his shirt. "They ain't here now, as you can see. Want to tell me what this is about? I ain't got long to listen, boy." Nathan looked around, knowing his scheme all along. The gang had been here looking for him, all right. He had been preparing the opportunity for himself all along. Okay, he had ripped off one bag and a small fortune in precursors from Haymaker's trailer, whatever. Now the meth had been made at his other house, and the greedy stoned hoods he called friends, and now had to get rid of, had played right into it, all the way. He'd make some calls tonight after he cooked some more back at his clandestine apartment, and he'd have some money, oh yeah. And speaking of money, no, I don't. You ain't gonna make it, are you, Grandpa? Look really bad. Well, I could call 911, but if you happen to die before the ambulance makes it out here, I get the house, a free place to live, and Haymaker and those douches get the blame. Just like I planned. 'Cause guess what? He squatted down beside his grandpa, giving him a light pat on the shoulder, a tiny grin on his pale face. I was behind it all. Punked them into thinking I ripped them off. Didn't take much effort for those guys to miss a bag. Got them stoked to come here, look for my dope, then do you in while they're looking for me. Win-win, man. I figure somebody in life owes me, and I'm thinking that's how it'll go down. He stood up, smile gone. Sorry, Grandpa. This is my only chance to get ahead. You know it. I know it. Hell, I'll bet those retards couldn't even find my stash. He chortled briefly. Wow, not sure what you did here. Look at this fucking mess, Nathan tittered. My gang is gone, and you gotta answer for this now, too. Think I'll be taking my stuff and be going now. So, Silas growled slowly in response. They're doing a home invasion looking to get some product from you here that doesn't exist. Druggies who try to kill me while there's blood everywhere, and now ain't no witnesses to see you going away. You show up later all innocent and get everything from my estate, and you don't have to do the dirty work. Ha! Just a mourning relative wanting to settle an old man's estate after a tragic break-in. That's what you'll tell the cops while you load up my life's belongings, right? Nathan's face had grown even more stony, a meth head caricature with his shaved head, spindly goatee, and neck tattoo. He thought remotely and responded simply, Yeah, that's good. Better than what I came up with, man. Silas managed to use what energy he had left to fill his next words with cold rage. You little, ungrateful bastard. I sacrificed everything for you and our country, and so did your dad. And now Jiry's gone. What are you thinking? Nathan spat out, matching his grandfather's own voice in ice. I'm thinking tough luck. Dad never gave a damn about me. It was always, ooh, the next assignment in the army. It was, ooh, getting himself a new girlfriend to make Mom jealous. Now it don't matter, though. And I think your time's done, too. And in the meantime, your life has become a waste. Nathan started to hiss a reply, but Silas cut in. Anyway, your drug buddies made their choices. Now, they're all long gone. Look, they're all over the floor. You'll reap what you sow too, boy. Whatever. I've been waiting long enough, and it's about damn time I get what's coming to me. All your shit, Grandpa, and I mean now. Little jackass, he started to look like a sullen toddler, whining and waving his gun around in childish annoyance. All the better. Oh, yes. Silas could not laugh anymore. His ribs hurt too much, but he managed to smirk as his vision darkened slightly. Yeah. Okay. You'll get everything that's coming to you, Nathan. And I mean now. At that time, Silas spied Gracie, the invalid, always falling behind, finally silently and asymmetrically ambling out of the basement into the room, elegant tail twitching and 3 eyes vehemently focused on the distress happening to the bowl filler, as if waiting for instructions from her tormented master. His hideously deformed cat, the monster he loved, was half the size of its mutated resurrected littermates due to its afflictions, but she silently waited and slithered as best it could into position in the shadows. Now Gracie could only think, deduce, protect Silas.
See meat fighting with bowl filler. It smell like family, I know, but it hurting Master Bowl Filler. Meat should die. Rusty, Jack, Pixie not here to help. It not right they leave me behind all the time, but we'll miss them. I never move right or keep up, but I smarter, not bear. I stay here while they go away to outside. No, I live and Bowl Filler live. Creator make Bowl Filler to come and save us. Creator make me to come help Bowl Filler now. Hope he help me move right, yes.
The setting sun, with its warm golden late summer angle and reddish background, was low in the sky, but still hit Silas in the eyes as he lay splayed out on the floor. He again heard the corn rustle, sweet as a mother's song below the rolling hills in the distance through his open screen window, knowing he'd never see it harvested. Silas was having trouble breathing at this time through his bloody exhalations, pain burning in his broken bones, and sensed his time was running out. One of his old Rare Earth albums had still been playing on the dusty old Pioneer turntable in the background, the stylus on the worn vinyl inexplicably unscathed throughout this entire melee. Well, fee-fi-fo-fo-fum. Now look out, baby, 'cause here I come. Green finally had to rest his head on the wooden floor, but turned his face toward his grandson to now offer his only heir a final choice. Tell you what, Nathan, he rasped. Yes, you can have the house, the guns, the Road King, the tractor, and whatever tools are in the barn, too. I have $5,000 in cash upstairs in the dresser, and Grandma's antique silverware in the kitchen cabinets. You can have all that now and go, or you can help me get to a hospital right now. What do you say? What's more important to you? The inebriated young man pondered for a moment. Meeting his grandfather's glare, he leered, I'm taking the stuff. Sorry, I need it now, and I'll be gone. Who's gonna even miss you? The cat monster was silently positioned behind Nathan now, seething through its 2 mouths and stalking on its deformed limbs. I hope I get to you before they do, 'cause that's how I planned it, Rare Earth happily warned. Nathan slowly raised the handgun as Silas cackled again while his body protested. Okay, so you made your choice. At least you did make a decision by yourself for once in your life, you worthless fuck. Therefore, everything I have is all yours now. I only have one more thing to say to you. Meat. And I mean meat. Nathan fumbled to pull the trigger on the cheap handgun he had just bought as Gracie responded to the call and did her best to pounce on the young man from behind, her large head embedding itself in the back of his neck and pulling him to the floor as the trigger was pulled. The bullet missed Silas and careened into nothing but old scarred-up hardwood floor. Even with her smaller stature and deformities, a now 250-pound cat was still much more than a match for a stoned 170-pound human, and she easily ripped into his jugular vein to finish him off. As Nathan bled out and fell onto the already blood-stained carpet, gun strewn away beyond his reach, he gurgled and cursed the former small kitten he could have killed in the dump when he was a child. Two-faced freak! But in his last seconds, he was now no more than a cripple himself as he tried to crawl and stumble along the floor, incapacitated and equalized in Gracie's world as she loomed over him growling. She slobbered and breathed heavily with a venomous sound, hissing out of her weird-looking small side mouth which, at least as Silas heard it, sounded condemningly like, "Meow, bad, bad." She lunged to finish Nathan off, then the world went black for him. Silas was fading fast and he knew it. He'd have to think of something. "Gracie, get me the phone off the counter." "Phone?" Gracie looked up in familiar curiosity, then hobbled into the kitchen looking for some human object. She spent effort being able to climb onto the counter and then just batted everything onto the floor, dirty dishes breaking and all, and looked back as if for further instructions when she batted a small black thing off the counter toward him. "A toy?" Silas exclaimed weakly. "That's it, Gracie. Bring it here." Of course, there was no treat to receive, just bloodshed and carnage now starting to stink within the farmhouse. But if Silas had to punk his pets to save his own life, then under the circumstances, this was okay. Her slobbery large mouth proudly deposited his cordless landline phone near Silas, who wasted no time dialing 911 as he started to fade out. Gracie licked him protectively, waited, and cocked her head for some imaginary treat, and then upon not receiving it, she slowly resigned herself to shuffle away to the front room, out onto the porch, and very slowly hobbled out behind the house and into the trees. As the cats faded away into the surrounding farm, first responders' sirens soon became louder and into Silas's damaged head as he remembered one sentence from long ago. "You last decision, the only one that really counts." As the next morning passed at Silas Green's farmhouse, Buchanan County Detective Mark Del Santo was brought in to get images and evidence of the most gruesome and bizarre crime scene he had ever been assigned to, and watching a lot of cops sitting outside getting sick. Despite his experience and even-handedness, he had no idea what to put, or not, into his report. On top of that, he'd have a tough time keeping down his greasy breakfast from Millie's Diner. His colleague Deputy Sherman had just reacted like some of the emergency responders who had shown up last night to take Silas Green away. They had all ralphed up upon opening the door to the old man's house. And who wouldn't? 5 young people's bodies were inside the warm putrid building, stripped of flesh and mangled like rotting fertilizer. 1 discharged handgun, 2 baseball bats. No way this carnage could have happened under normal circumstances. Del Santo, a born-again Catholic, had the satisfaction of knowing that while Green had somehow called 911, and as the ambulance had taken what was left of him to IU Southern Hospital, one of them, a young EMT named Caleb Meyer, had managed to share Christ with the old man. Stubborn, hateful Silas had received him as his Lord and Savior in the ambulance, and in the process, confessed a multitude of sins that would have made most priests blush. He also bizarrely wanted to know if the big little ones were all right. Caleb didn't have an answer for that, but said yes and not to worry. Silas Green passed away from blood loss and trauma before they even wheeled him into the hospital. While Del Santo knew he could never publicly relate what had happened, at least he'd make sure the police crime scene footage wouldn't end up on YouTube. The sheriff and mayor of Yellowwood certainly wanted this situation to remain a non-media event, and it simply became referred to as a drug-induced euphoric altercation of violence to shine light on the meth scourge of Buchanan County. The families of the victims could not be given any official explanations for the gruesome situation, and their perplexed civil trial lawyers couldn't make a case for some entitling restitution without any living witnesses to suck money from. Ultimately, a sheriff's sale for the old farmhouse, which would be demolished, and its land would be quickly mandated, given no heirs stepping forth to claim the property. However, a couple days after the event, Del Santo went back to the house to do follow-up investigation work and gather whatever forensic evidence was still available. His guys had wiped the place clean. Funny, no trace of drugs, no sense of this being a drug deal gone bad. Still no evidence of the Thorn Road killers and whatever kind of weapons they had used on Nathan Green and the other punks. No rival gang graffiti tags, and why stage an ambush at an old vet's house? Silas Green had been clearly bludgeoned and knifed, but no giant bite or claw marks as with the unfortunate others in the house. This mystery could never probably be explained, let alone solved, he realized. Meanwhile, he stopped to wipe his mind from the gruesome images from the scene, thinking about Trisha and the kids probably outside playing with Denali the Husky now, supposedly getting the yard cleaned up for next weekend's upcoming barbecue for some of the guys on the force the week before they would all have to work security for the annual tourist hectic Yellowwood Foliage Fest, the only time most outsiders knew the town was even on the map. As Mark went outside to examine the giant claw marks on the tank of the smashed Harley still to be towed away, there, by the back of the house, he saw them. The cop rubbed his eyes. A 9-foot-tall Asian man with a large oriental hat was sitting back serenely whittling something as a huge feline regally sat nearby in the shade by the foundation. They both then looked up at him. 4 odd-looking little house cats were cuddled around the visitors. One had 2 large fangs, another had oversized feet and claws, the third was, well, very large, and the smallest one was simply a hobbling mutation. The huge cat sat down, spiraling around a few times to get comfortable, then spoke with broken English and a deep Vietnamese accent. "What you looking for, authority man? You not understand what happened here? One man, Silas Green, get mercy and grace. Others not. They could have had their chance. You never solve case. Not human possible. You wanna know? Big little ones here are responsible. Ha! Just little cats. Who know? Who believe it? Two-face runt with stagger. Man think not worth keeping. But Creator use her slowness to protect Green at the right moment. Keep him alive at right time when others gone. No one else think of that." Gracie meowed with her large mouth as if in agreement as the others play-fought over what was left in the mysteriously provided water and food bowls. "Have idea. Maybe you adopt and take care of big little ones, yes? Deserve better than die in polluted ground. Could get them to pet doctor, make normal. Could live for years. Not need go back to soil so fast like before." Okay, sure. I'll take them today if that will make you guys happy." "Hey, doesn't he speak?" Mark asked, nervously pointing to the villager angel in the bizarre conversation. "Ha! If you hear him speak, you die. What? Talking giant cat? Not enough to get your attention, mortal?" The laid-back intervention just smiled at that, petting the mercurial, impatient harbinger as his giant tail became a bushy exclamation mark. Del Santo suddenly started to grasp the spiritual aspect of this unreal conversation, but the hard part to swallow was why someone like Silas Green, a hardened man he had known for years, had such mercy and protection shown to him through whatever means while the others in the house, including Green's own grandson, had shared a wrathful fate somehow. Maybe because when it came down to life's very end, however gruesome it came down when the light was being shut off at the end of the tunnel, someone like Silas would be one to respond to a final offer of salvation, while others wouldn't. But if these two were some sort of guardian angels and the cats some bizarre incarnation as Green's protectors, this was all too far out to mark. So after all of this, life's not fair after all, is it? Mark muttered contemplatively. No, and you be grateful for that. You churchman, why not understand? Grace, getting what you not deserve. Mercy, not getting what you do deserve. Be glad someone gets saved before they die. That all you can know now. Who know? We may need visit you too sometime too. A breeze picked up and some leaves scattered as the group of displaced resurrected pets marched toward Mark and sat before him expectantly. The little deformed cat with 3 eyes and 2 mouths lumbered toward Mark. He heard it, swore he heard it, softly and clearly articulate out of its little mouth. Remember, bowl filler, the things which are impossible with men are possible with God. The 2 unearthly beings disappeared then, while DeSanto just stood there, freaking out.
Chilling tales for dark nights.